Chapter 661, Seeing Swamp Crab Again. Found it. Fang Yuan's eyes shone, he had arrived before a purple stone pillar. Tai Bai Yunsheng looked in the direction of his voice, merely to see that this crucial pillar was very ordinary. Just that at the base of the stone pillar, there was a rock, flat and smooth like a bench, it looked slightly special. This is it. Fang Yuan stretched out a large monstrous arm, sweeping the snow off the stone bench, confirming it. After Tai Bai Yunsheng went into his immortal aperture, Fang Yuan sat down on the bench, using a gu worm to cut his arm and letting the blood drip onto this purple stone pillar. His blood was not red like normal people, it was a jade-green color and had no warmth, it was ice-cold. The purple stone pillar had once been modified by thieving heaven demon Venerable with the use of his mysterious gu worm, the jade-green zombie blood was quickly absorbed. Ma Hongyun's figure swiftly flashed across Fang Yuan's mind. This opportunity originally belonged to Ma Hongyun, Fang Yuan could be said to be a thief. After Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun were sent out of the wind veil of assimilation by the luck path true inheritance, they were snatched by Northern Plains righteous and demonic gu immortals, it was a scene of chaos. Right now, there was no news on the two of them, one could confirm that they were captured by a gu immortal. Whether they could escape or what ordeals they were going through, no one knew. Compared to his previous life, Ma Hongyun was much more pitiful in this life. One could see that even with fortune that rivals heaven, it is not omnipotent. Luck only provides opportunities, whether one could use them well, that depends on the gu master's strength and abilities. Right now, everyone was still looking for Ma Hongyun, but no one knew which gu immortal had hidden them. The allure of the luck path true inheritance was too great, especially for Northern Plains gu immortals. My spring-autumn cicada has the weakness of impairing my own luck, if I can use the luck path true inheritance to fix this flaw, it would be the best method. Since rebirth, I have already suffered many difficulties from bad luck. Fang Yuan sighed in his heart. Not only was Ma Hongyun a good target as a valuable treasure, most importantly, during this Northern Plains trip, Ma Hongyun was an eyewitness, he was an insider and would likely expose Fang Yuan and the others. Thus, Ma Hongyun also posed a death threat to He Lulan. Killing Ma Hongyun was one of the agreements in the Snowy Mountain Alliance. Entering Langyup Blessed Land again, Fang Yuan did not enter the Cloud Building's room like last time. Langyup Blessed Land's unique terrain was that it was situated on vast white cloud soil. 12 buildings, at equal lengths apart, were situated on the cloud soil, they were the 12 cloud buildings. But what Fang Yuan saw was a messy sight. The fertile cloud soil was full of holes. There was ice forming in some holes, while black smoke was rising in some holes. Tai Bai Yunsheng came out of Fang Yuan's immortal aperture, upon seeing this, he said, a battle had occurred here not long ago. It seems that Langyup Land's spirit was really in trouble. Fang Yuan did not speak, he only looked at the 12 cloud buildings far away. These 12 buildings had their respective features, some had immortal cranes flying around them, some had feathermen living in them, some had beautiful auroras, while some had the smell of incense. But right now, only 8 of these 12 buildings were intact, the remaining 3 were in bad shape, walls were collapsed and structures were crumbling. What happened? We are already in Langyup Blessed Land, yet the land spirit has yet to appear. Tai Bai Yunsheng frowned, feeling very alert in his heart. Let's go in and see first. Fang Yuan pondered. The two flew over, slowly getting close to the 12 cloud buildings. Quickly look, there is a desolate beast corpse there. After moving for some time, Tai Bai Yunsheng suddenly pointed at one direction, saying. Only to see that a huge fish was lying on the cloud soil, not moving. It had the size of a normal whale, but it looked like a carp. There were bones protruding out of its back, along the spine, extending outwards. Its scales were blue in color, its eyes were as large as a horse carriage, with some starry radiance in them. This is the desolate beast, spine-fin star dragonfish. Fong Yuan said. He knew that Langya Land's spirit had a beast enslavement immortal Gu and enslaved 12 desolate beasts, each kept in one of the 12 cloud buildings. Was this spine-fin star dragonfish one of the 12? Oh. Someone came in. In a dark secret room, Langya Land's spirit opened his eyes, sensing Fong Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng. In front of him, there was a Gu immortal. He was middle-aged and had a mighty disposition. His appearance was not that of a normal man, he had black skin and white hair, he was an Inkman Gu immortal. What? Another strong foe? The Inkman Gu immortal heard the land's spirit and became nervous. Oh, it is that rascal. Pfft, he scared me. No worry, I know this person. Half a year ago, he came here before. After Langya Land's spirit focused his mind to detect them, he breathed out deeply. The Inkman Gu immortal raised his brows in surprise, he did not think that there would be other guests coming to Langya blessed land besides himself. Since they are friends and not foes, then all is well. It has been 3 days and 3 nights since we entered the secret room, in just a moment, we can release 1 layer of the seals on you. At this time, we cannot be disturbed. The Inkman Gu immortal's heart settled. But we cannot let them near the cloud building. Old friend, you might not know this, but that kid is crafty and scheming, he is thieving Heaven Demon Venerable's inheritor, I suffered a loss from him in the past. Let me mobilize the desolate beast and stop him from coming temporarily. Langya Land's spirit gritted his teeth and said. We've been in here for so long, yet Langya Land's spirit has not appeared yet, it seems something huge happened here. The attack on Langya blessed land was definitely not done by one person. Such a force is not to be trifled with, we should search the battlefield and retreat for now. Tai Bai Yunsheng was speaking, when suddenly, a large, golden metallic mountain rock drilled out of the cloud soil. The cubic rock moved quickly, blocking the way of the 2. Desolate beast. Tai Bai Yunsheng readied himself to face this enemy. The desolate beast had no eyes, a large pair of pincers were right in front of it. No one dared to doubt the power of these fearsome weapons. Furthermore, it had 9 pairs of legs, coming out of the cubic rock as they extended. The crab legs stabbed into the cloud soil, propping the desolate beast's large body up. At this point, Tai Bai Yunsheng recognized the origins of this desolate beast, this is the Lord of Swamps, Swamp Crab. Fong Yuan snorted, he was very familiar with the swamp crab. After all, when he had just obtained Hu immortal blessed land, he faced a swamp crab in his tribulation. Most importantly, that swamp crab had the gruel mud immortal Gu, causing great destruction to Dang Hun Mountain. In order to save Dang Hun Mountain, Fong Yuan had to enter northern plains and attempt to take Tai Bai Yunsheng's landscape as before immortal Gu. Now, after braving many dangers, not only did he succeed in saving Dang Hun Mountain, he even recruited Tai Bai Yunsheng to join him, one could say he obtained both the Gu and the Gu Master. The swamp crab blocked their path, Tai Bai Yunsheng stopped in his tracks and asked Fong Yuan, what do we do now? Fong Yuan's gaze was locked on the desolate beast, he said one word, fight. Be careful. Tai Bai Yunsheng nodded, swiftly retreating, pulling some distance from Fong Yuan. He was a healing Gu immortal, in most situations, he would not charge forward and take a risk, this was also in line with his usual personality. Fong Yuan floated in the air, looking at the swamp crab silently. Next, he breathed in deeply, straightened his back and stretched his 8 arms. The muscles on his body bulged, resembling an iron monster. His eyes were blood red, his green face and sharp fangs gave off a ruthless and terrifying aura. At the next moment, Fong Yuan moved, his body was like a meteor crashing towards the swamp crab. The swamp crab was huge, but it was unbelievably agile, 9 pairs of legs moved quickly, as it dodged sideways. But Fong Yuan was a flying master, even though it seemed like he would miss, with just a turn, he crashed into the swamp crab's back. Bam! With a thunderous sound, the swamp crab was pushed into the ground by Fang Yuan's forceful impact. His over 6 meters tall body stood in a crater. This was the damage caused by his attack. Tough enough. Fang Yuan grinned, pulling back 4 of his right arms. His fists, without exception, were torn open and showed the white bones inside. But Fang Yuan had lost his sense of pain. Even though his fists were injured, they was healing at an insane speed. In just a few breaths' time, his 4 right fists recovered completely. Puff puff. 2 waves of fierce winds approached to assault him. Fang Yuan's wings opened, as he tread into and flew in the air like lightning, dodging the fierce winds. Hearing 2 sharp sounds, Fang Yuan turned around to look, only to see that the swamp crab's huge pincers were bending at an unbelievable angle, towards his back and snapping together. If Fang Yuan dodged slower, he would have been hit already. The battle strength of a desolate beast was comparable to a rank 6 Gu immortal. Even with the absurd defense of Fang Yuan's heavenly zombie body, he did not want to endure the attack. The swamp crab's armor is extraordinarily hard, there is almost no flaws in its defense. I do not have cutting or drilling abilities, I can only break through with pure strength, using power to force my way through is the best method. Fang Yuan's thoughts collided intensely in his mind. His body continued to rise, as he looked down. In just a few breaths of time, the swamp crab's body was full of crabs. These crabs were as large as tigers, they were fearless. Some had sharp crab legs, resembling needles. Some had claw-like limbs, and were very fast. This was the special ability of the swamp crab, it could reproduce at any time and place, summoning a crab army that would move according to its will. Very good. Fang Yuan's gaze was cold and dark, he breathed in deeply and activated the killer move, Miri itself. With the expenditure of 1 bead of green grape immortal essence, he activated the core immortal Gu. Thereafter, large numbers of Gu worms started activating in a certain pattern. Fang Yuan's 8 fists pounded at the swamp crab below him. Bam bam bam. Each fist exploded with a formless fist chi, the shadows of the fists were flying as his punches rained down like a torrential storm. The swamp crab cried out pitifully, it was being pressed into the ground by the unceasing fist chi. Thousands of fist chi slammed on the swamp crab's back, causing its hard shell to become deformed. The fist chi that dispersed formed and gathered, becoming one of Fang Yuan's strength path phantoms. 10 breaths later, an army of strength path phantoms formed on the swamp crab's back. This is. Tai Bai Yun Sheng was shocked, this was the first time he had seen this killer move. The strength path phantom army surrounded the swamp crab, and the crab army collapsed at once. The swamp crab was unable to endure the attacks and cried out, trying to put up resistance, but it could not prevent its imminent defeat. No matter how many strength path phantoms it killed, Fang Yuan continued to attack, and more strength path phantoms were produced every moment. Ah, my desolate beast! What killer move did this rascal use? I have never seen it, it is actually so strong. This killer move has definitely got to be an immortal killer move. In the secret room, Lang Yalan's spirit could see all that was going on, he lost his cool as he started shouting. Chapter 662, Inkman King. Lang Yalan's spirit felt heartache when he looked at his swamp crab. The swamp crab was lying down flat on the ground, unable to stand up. Its 9 pairs of legs were almost entirely torn to pieces, and even one of the enormous steel pincers at the front was shattered. Such a battle outcome caused the Inkman Gu immortal and Tai Bai Yun Sheng to feel a chill from the depths of their hearts. Fang Yuan struck with over 10,000 strength path phantoms, of which over 3,000 still remained. He calmly stored the remaining phantoms into his immortal aperture. These phantoms could only exist for a period of time, and beyond that limit, the fist chi would dissipate and the phantoms would disappear along with it. But as long as they could be used, Fang Yuan would not waste even one of them. Ever since he returned to Hu immortal blessed land from northern plains, he had been penniless. He did not even have one immortal essence stone, thus he was not able to replenish large numbers of mortal goo. From the battle just now, he had already probed, with just the 8-armed immortal zombie body, it was hard for him to pose much threat to the heavy armored swamp crab. The only option thus was to use his killer move, Myriad Self. The core of this killer move was a soul path immortal goo that Fang Yuan possessed, and so it required green grape immortal essence to be activated. The situation earlier was not clear, thus Fang Yuan decisively gave up a bead of green grape immortal essence to take control of the situation. The killer move Myriad Self was indeed created from the convergence of enslavement and strength path, its might was extraordinary. The swamp crab, which had brought huge trouble to Fang Yuan once before, causing him to use all his strength in order to barely deal with it, could not even raise its head from the beatings of Myriad Self, it continued to be in a disadvantage with no hopes of freeing itself. You rascal, entering my home without a word and also injuring my desolate beast, how will you compensate me? Langya Land's spirit furiously chided Fang Yuan. Tai Bai Yun Sheng was engrossed in looking at this land spirit from behind Fang Yuan. Langya Land's spirit was thin with white hair, having a beard that reached his chest and a ruddy face like that of a baby's. He was wearing a loose robe over his whole body and the 2 sleeves were fluttering in the air. If not for him seething with anger and staring at Fang Yuan with his eyes wide open, his demeanor would no doubt look elegant and sagely. Fang Yuan was already familiar with Langya Land's spirit, he stared at the shackles around Langya Land's spirit, frowning, you have been sealed, no wonder I could not hear any news of your divine sense in treasure yellow heaven. According to Northern Plains time, we have not met for merely more than half a year, how could you end up like this? Langya Land's spirit's eyes opened even wider as he snarkily retorted, talk about yourself, how did you become like this? Neither human nor ghost. Advancing to a goo immortal and yet degenerating into a zombie, hee, you should still have plenty of lifespan though. Humph, Langya Land's spirit, you have lived for so many years yet you don't even know the simplest logic of give and take. Only by giving up one thing can you gain another, if I didn't turn into a zombie, how could I be in front of you again and hold such powerful strength? But you, the longer you lived, the more you regress, now you can't even refine goo. You are really making your main body lose face. Fang Yuan sneered, intentionally provoking the land spirit. Langya Land's spirit's sore spots were prodded and he immediately stamped his foot in anger. Not long ago, Langya Blessed Land had suffered an attack from a mysterious force. Langya Land's spirit was able to repel the invaders but he ended up sealed by a chi path killer move. Thus, he ended up having to invite his best friend to remove the seals. Langya Land's spirit started cursing at Fang Yuan, you shitty kid, you still have the nerve to talk about me? Truyang Building's fall was definitely caused by you, right? Hee, so many people died, 2 super forces lost their tribe leaders, the whole of Northern Plains Gu immortals are searching for you, the main culprit. You are now everyone's target, your life must be pretty hard now, right? The Inkman Gu immortal and Tai Bai Yun Sheng's expressions changed. The Inkman Gu immortal's pupils shrunk slightly, feeling an intense urge to cover the land spirit's mouth. But the land spirit had already said everything, it was too late. How could you blurt out such a matter? Are you not afraid those 2 will attack to silence us? The Inkman Gu immortal's heart could not help but tremble with fear, these 2 were actually the people who had turned Northern Plains on its head and even wrecked Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's arrangements. Too dangerous. The situation was going south. The next moment, both Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yun Sheng gazed coldly at the Inkman Gu immortal. Even if the Inkman Gu immortal had high position and authority normally and had extraordinary strength himself, right now he could feel his heart going cold under the gaze of these 2 ruthless monsters. Langya Land's spirit, why are you not introducing us to this person? Fang Yuan chuckled, his voice was so hoarse that it was borderline uncomfortable to hear. I can't let Xianxia land spirit reply, who knows what this loose-lipped guy will say. Thus, the Inkman Gu immortal summoned his courage and stood up, greeting, my name is Mo Tan Sang, I live in Inkman City and am the king of Northern Plains Inkmen. Tai Bai Yunxing raised his brows, he had not expected this person to have such an origin and immediately looked at the Inkman king in another color. Currently, the 5 regions were dominated by humans. Variant humans were living while pressured on all sides, many were sold as slaves or raised as pets, their livelihood was rather difficult. But in Northern Plains, Inkmen had the most favorable status among the variant humans. Many variant humans had no fixed residence and would have to wander around like vagabonds. But Inkmen had established a city in Northern Plains, which possessed 3 Inkman Gu immortals. Mo Tan Sang was the Inkman city's king. Under his leadership, the Inkmen were able to resist pressure from various forces and withstand the covetous gazes of countless Gu immortals. It was not easy to maintain the Inkman's survival, it served to show how talented and skilled the Inkman king was. Inkman King Mo Tan Sang. Fong Yuan muttered inwardly. He had an impression of this name. In the chaotic war of the 5 regions during his previous life, the Inkman king took advantage of the lack of attention paid to him due to the human tribes being too busy in their internal conflicts to grab the opportunity and develop rapidly, greatly expanding the Inkman forces. When Northern Plains human forces wanted to suppress him, he actually disregarded his dignity as the king and threw himself to Lu tribe. He took a servant's right to Lu tribe's supreme elder and became a servant to him. Lu tribe was one of the super forces, thus the Inkman forces were protected. The Inkman forces grew stably under this layer of protection. Later, when Lu tribe weakened, the Inkman king immediately gave up on Lu tribe to collaborate with Ma Hongyun on equal terms. Before Fong Yuan self-detonated, the Inkmen had hundreds of cities and occupied 1/3 of Northern Plains lands. From this one could see how talented and insightful the Inkman king Mo Tan Sang was. Not only did he have unique foresight and courage to take resolute actions, he could also bow and submit when necessary, he was not someone who could be belittled. Fong Yuan lightly praised, so it is the Inkman king, sure enough, you have a majestic aura beyond that of ordinary people. I am not worthy of such high praise. Inkman king quickly replied modestly. The person before him was the main criminal in destroying 88 Tru Yang building, he had to be extremely vigilant against such a dangerous person. Discover. He took the initiative to explain, Xianxia land spirit and I have been very good friends for many years. In truth, Inkman City has always had close relations with Xianxia blessed land. We in Inkman City have some attainment in Chi Path, and it turns out Xianxia land spirit was sealed using a Chi Path method. Thus I hurried over to help. Sir is a dragon who roams the sky, stirring up a storm and causing the whole of Northern Plains to be in a state of unrest. I cannot help but admire such grandeur. All along, our Inkman city has been jointly suppressed by the Huangjin tribes. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable was even more overboard, demanding Inkman cities to offer tribute in terms of countless female Inkmen. In a way, you have helped us Inkmen take revenge by destroying Imperial Court Blessed Land. You are also the land spirit's friends, so you are my Mo Tan Sang's friends as well. If you have any plans in the future, feel free to visit Inkman City. He was indeed the Inkman king, such outstanding eloquence that completely expressed his goodwill in just one conversation, especially speaking in neither a servile nor overbearing tone, it was extremely hard to come by. Who is friends with this rascal? Xianxia land spirit shouted in dissatisfaction. However, he felt happy in the depths of his heart when he heard Fong Yuan praising his friend, and the anger he felt previously had reduced. Fong Yuan nodded to the Inkman King, replying with deep intent, "If there is an opportunity, I will definitely come to experience life in Inkman City." He then looked at Langya Land Spirit and continued provoking him without concern, "Land Spirit, even if I am not your friend, you should still welcome me and refine a gu for me. Did you forget I still have one chance left to make you refine gu? If I want you to refine gu, you will do it even if you don't want to." Langya Land Spirit could not put up a facade at all, his temper flaring up immediately. Normally, gu immortals would be polite and even flatter him to request him to refine gu. When had he ever heard disrespectful words like Fong Yuan's? But Fong Yuan was speaking the truth, he still had the final chance to request for gu refinement. Langya Land Spirit was long-hair ancestors' obsession, and he must abide by the agreement his main body had agreed to back then. "You damned scoundrel, I am so angry, my anger is going to explode." Langya Land Spirit shouted, his face completely red with fury. But suddenly, he grinned with happiness, "Ahahaha, I am trapped, this cheap path seal is too troublesome, there are a total of 17 or 18 layers of seals. Just now, Inkman King only unsealed the first layer. Hahaha, I really can't help you refine gu right now, my hands are tied, this is wonderful." He had been bored to death since he was sealed, not being able to do refinement meant his greatest hobby had been taken away. But right now, he was feeling quite happy about it. It was all Fong Yuan's fault. Seeing this weirdo Langya Land Spirit shouting and laughing like a buffoon, Tai Bai Yunxing felt this trip was worth it, his horizons were broadened. Inkman King was silent, he was the leader of a large force and was not willing to easily offend Fong Yuan. Fong Yuan coughed before speaking solemnly, "All right, let's talk about serious affairs. Since you can't refine gu, forget about it. I have another matter for coming over this time, I want to make a transaction with you." "Transaction? What transaction?" Langya Land Spirit asked. Inkman King immediately turned vigilant. Langya Land Spirit might have high intelligence but his nature was frank, it was hard to say that he wouldn't be cheated. Inkman King was the Land Spirit's good friend, if Fong Yuan truly was conspiring, he would stand up and expose Fong Yuan's scheme. "The transaction is simple, you should remember the thing about me being a wisdom path gu master, right? I will deduce immortal gu recipes for you while you will pay immortal essence stones as remuneration. This is a win-win deal." Fong Yuan replied. "Deduce gu recipes?" Langya Land Spirit opened his eyes wide as he became dazed, but at the next moment he started laughing loudly. He was swaying back and forth in his laughter, if his hands were not bound, he might have been slapping his thighs together in laughter. Langya Land Spirit ridiculed, "Fong Yuan, oh Fong Yuan, you are now a zombie and still think you can deduce gu recipes? Moreover, immortal gu recipes? This old man advises you to get rid of this thought." Inkman King, however, said, "An immortal gu recipe, even if it is a remnant recipe, has a high price. If we give it to Sir to deduce it, but you fail in the process, then wouldn't we be handing you the contents of the immortal gu recipe for nothing?" Langya Land Spirit was startled to awareness, immediately yelling in rage, "Great, you actually wanted to swindle me of immortal gu recipes." Fong Yuan had already prepared for this and laughed, opening his monstrous palm to reveal an immortal gu. "Look, what is this?" Chapter 663, Recognizing Immortal Gu. At once, everyone's attention was attracted to the gu worm in Fong Yuan's palm. The immortal aura of the gu worm was radiating with the laws of the world, without doubt, it was an immortal gu. But no one knew which immortal gu it was. Only Tai Bai Yunxing's heart shook, as he remembered what Fong Yuan had revealed to him in the past. This gu. Langya Land Spirit watched with shining eyes, "I have never seen this gu before, this is a new gu." He jumped in front of Fong Yuan, his nose was only 2 inches away from the gu, next he sniffed like smelling a flower. He screamed, "Ah, this is the aura of luck path, this is a luck path Gu worm. Good lad, you destroyed Truyang building, but it seems you had many gains." Fong Yuan immediately mocked, to think that the Grand Langya land spirit would have such shallow knowledge. This is not a new Gu, it had appeared 10,000 years ago. Let me teach you, this Gu's name is Calamity Beckoning, it was invented by a certain generation's fairy of Central Continent Spirit Affinity House, Mo Yao. Mo Yao. Inkman King heard this and his eyes shone. If I remember correctly, this woman is a rare legend in Inkman history. She cultivated to rank 7, and had overwhelming charm, even the Grand Sword Immortal Bo Qing was attracted to her. Inkman King talked with a fanatical expression, like he was speaking of a treasure. I apologize about my demeanor, but I have been looking up to Senior Mo Yao as my role model since youth, thus I am very familiar with her stories. Fong Yuan found this a little humorous, to think that this Inkman King was a fan of Fairy Mo Yao. But now was not the time to chit-chat with the Inkman King. Fong Yuan used this chance to mock Langya land spirit. Langya land spirit was so ashamed from his words that his face turned red, he wanted to find a hole to hide himself in. He grumbled under his breath, but he did not rebuke Fong Yuan. After all, he really did not know this immortal Gu. After Fong Yuan made some snide remarks in a mystifying tone for a while, he saw that the time was right and took back Calamity Beckoning Immortal Gu, fishing out another immortal Gu. Langya land spirit, didn't you say you were well learnt and knowledgeable? I will give you another chance, see what Gu worm this is. Langya land spirit stared with wide open eyes, he moved forward to take a closer look. After a few breaths' time, he took a deep breath, his nervous expression became smug. Of course I know this immortal Gu, its name is Cleanse Soul, it is a cultivation assistance type Gu for Soul Path Gu Immortals. The cultivation of Soul Path includes strengthening the soul, refining the soul, and pacifying the soul. The best way to strengthen the soul is Dang Hun Mountain's Guts Gu, the best way to refine the soul is Luo Pa Valley's Bewilderment Fog and Luo Pa Wind. As for pacifying the soul, it would be the pacifying soul soup in Bewitching Lake. This Cleanse Soul Immortal Gu can refine a Gu immortal soul, getting rid of all the impurities. But if it was used excessively, it would get rid of even the essence of their soul. Oh. You actually recognize this Gu? Fong Yuan pretended to be shocked, thinking in his heart, so this immortal Gu is called Cleanse Soul, I called it Split Soul in the past, I guess I was wrong. This Cleanse Soul Immortal Gu was the core Gu of the killer move Myriad Self. The killer move, Myriad Self, could form Strength Path Phantoms of Fong Yuan. These Strength Path Phantoms had a trace of his soul, thus Fong Yuan could manipulate them freely like an extension of his own body, it was agile and flexible. But precisely due to this, the killer move Myriad Self expended Fong Yuan's soul foundation. Langya land spirit saw Fong Yuan's shock and his smugness intensified on his face. But Fong Yuan quickly said, count yourself lucky, you coincidentally recognized this immortal Gu. Hey, what do you mean luck, this is my strength. If you really have strength, how could you not recognize Calamity Beckoning Immortal Gu? You. Never mind, take a look at this Gu, I'm sure you cannot recognize it. Show me, I will definitely know what it is. Langya land spirit shouted. Fong Yuan took out another Gu. Langya land spirit concentrated his attention on analyzing, he laughed a few breaths later, haha, this is the Cloud Path Immortal Gu, Rising Azure Cloud. Rising Azure Cloud? Tai Bai Yunxing interjected. That's right. Langya land spirit said proudly, shaking his head, this Gu is a movement-type immortal Gu, it has a long history. Gu immortals can use it to easily travel through mountains and cross water bodies. But what is most valuable, is that this Gu's ascending and descending speed is extremely fast, it far exceeds most other Gu of the same rank. So this immortal Gu is called Rising Azure Cloud. Fong Yuan thought about it, appearing as if he was not satisfied, he took out another immortal Gu. Land spirit, it seems you might possibly have some skill. Look at this Gu. Fong Yuan said. What do you mean might possibly? Of course I have skill. Langya Land spirit rebuked, his eyes were shining as he looked at Fong Yuan's palm. After a few breaths, his expression changed. Oh, it's you. What Gu is this? Tai Bai Yunxing asked again at an appropriate time. At this point, he had already understood Fong Yuan's intention. Although Fong Yuan had captured these Gu in Truyang Building, he did not know their origins, he had been guessing. There was no doubt that familiarizing oneself with unknown immortal Gu was very troublesome. The most direct method was to consume immortal essence and activate the immortal Gu, to directly see their effects. But this had some flaws. Firstly, immortal essence was precious. Secondly, immortal Gu had huge power, it might cause harm to oneself if used wrongly. For example, Calamity Beckoning Gu and Spring Autumn Cicada could not be used blindly. Thirdly, some immortal Gu have very peculiar uses, even if they were activated, they would not show any effect if the target or environment was inappropriate. Even though Wisdom Gu could help Fong Yuan could only make deductions based on the information he already had. Langya Land Spirit did not suspect a thing, he flaunted his knowledge. This immortal Gu is peculiar and vile, it is a one-time consumable Gu. Although I have never seen it personally, I have heard about it in historical records, back then I paid close attention due to having a special impression of it. This Gu's name is Woman's Heart. It is different from ordinary immortal Gu, its refinement and nurturing occur together. Fong Yuan was immediately intrigued. Gu worms were classified into nurture, use, and refinement, these three aspects. Generally with the three aspects, although they affected each other, each still stood alone. An immortal Gu with nurturing and refinement combined into one, Fong Yuan had never seen any. But Fong Yuan was very familiar with a type of Gu worm that combined use and nurturing, this was the rank 5 blood guillotine Gu that had a vile reputation. Then, what exactly was this woman's heart Gu that combined refinement and nurturing? Fong Yuan was curious, but he could not ask directly. At this point, Tai Bai Yunxing cooperated and asked, it can actually combine nurturing and refinement, this is the first time I've heard of this despite my long life. Langya Land Spirit gave Tai Bai Yunxing a look, lad, you are still young, you have not lived for long enough. The variety of Gu worms is as wide as the sea. The three aspects of nurturing, use, and refinement are extremely vast and profound. As the saying goes, a woman's heart is the deadliest poison. This immortal Gu, woman's heart, is a poison path immortal Gu, with a lethal poison. To nurture it, you will need the hearts of women. The process of feeding would also be the process of continually refining and promoting the Gu. The more hearts fed to it, the more powerful its poison. Tai Bai Yunxing's expression changed, it needs the hearts of women. Such evil and cruelty, this is a demonic Gu. Actually, you can use the hearts of female variant humans to replace it, but the effect would be worse than human hearts. To achieve the same toxicity, you will need many more hearts. Langya Land Spirit recalled. Tai Bai Yunxing's expression was solemn, even variant humans are people, they have parents, they have flesh and blood, love and hatred, how can they be sacrificed so easily? Just to feed a demonic Gu. Saying this, Tai Bai Yunxing looked at Fong Yuan in worry. Fong Yuan was expressionless, he put away the immortal Gu woman's heart, and took out another immortal Gu, Langya Land Spirit, I admit you have a degree of skill. But this level is still slightly inferior to me. Ha ha ha, the immortal Gu in my hand now, there is no way you can guess it. Fong Yuan seemed to have complete confidence, Langya Land Spirit's gaze was immediately attracted to the new immortal Gu. This is also a luck path immortal Gu. He sniffed with his nose, turning nervous. But a few breaths later, his nervousness vanished, he breathed out deeply, I know this immortal Gu, back then, my main body had seen this immortal Gu during a discussion about cultivation with Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. Oh! Such a coincidence. Fong Yuan showed a look of disbelief. Upped. TED Chapters. NN. Velbin.com. Of course. Langya Lan's spirit's eyes were burning with fire. Fong Yuan's disbelief made him extremely upset. To prove himself, he spilled all that he knew. This immortal Gu is called Connect Luck. It has a very special use. It can allow a Gu master's luck to be connected to other people's luck. If one has good luck, it will be shared to the other person. Similarly, if one has bad luck, it will also affect the other party. If you have luck inspection Gu, you can inspect the formless luck of other people. If you see a person with good luck, you can use this Connect Luck Immortal Gu. But this is not the best method to use it, because luck is like a tide, its rises and falls are uncertain. If you do this, you still would want to use another immortal Gu, break luck, in tandem. Another better method is to coordinate this with other luck path immortal Gu, to connect your own luck to the luck of mountains and valleys, to the luck of a long river, or the luck of a blessed land or grotto heaven, or even the luck of an immemorial desolate beast. Tai Bai Yunxing immediately understood the reasoning behind this. He stated praise, "That's right, famous mountains and valleys have been around for ages, blessed lands and grotto heavens are unlikely to be destroyed, and immemorial desolate beasts are on par with rank 8 Gu immortals. The luck of these things is much more reliable than humans." Langya Land's spirit side, luck path takes a peculiar direction, while also piercing deeply into the great Tao of heaven and earth. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, who first created it, had amazing talent. He was extraordinary. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable discussed about Tao with my main body for 7 days and 7 nights, even my main body was full of admiration for him. Inkman King continued, in history, the 10 Venerables were all supreme existences. Even as an Inkman, I am full of admiration for them. He had understood Fong Yuan's intentions since long ago. It was to obtain knowledge about the immortal Gu from Langya Land's spirit. But he did not expose this. Fong Yuan did not harm Langya Land's spirit. Inkman King had no need to ruin his tenuous relationship with Fong Yuan for no reason. Fong Yuan nodded at the Inkman King, before turning to Langya Land's spirit and saying, "Let's go back to the deal. I am full of sincerity. I had never thought of taking your immortal Gu recipes for myself. Land spirit, when I deduce the immortal Gu recipe for you, I will place an immortal Gu with you as collateral. By then, if I fail to analyze it, but had already seen the immortal Gu recipe, you can take this immortal Gu. You will feel assured in this case, right? The value of an immortal Gu far exceeded any immortal Gu recipe." Langya Land's spirit exchanged eye contact with the Inkman King, before shouting, "Rascal, it seems you are very confident in yourself. Okay, this deal is not risky for me at all, in fact, I profit from it. I will say this first, I will give you only 3 immortal Gu recipes. It doesn't matter which one it is, but you need to completely deduce an immortal Gu recipe to count as a success. If you succeed in deducing the recipe of an immortal Gu, hand it to me and I will pay you the immortal essence stones, as well as another remnant recipe." Okay. Fong Yuan did not hesitate, he immediately agreed. Chapter 664, Bountiful Harvest. After successfully coming to an agreement with Langya Land's spirit, Fong Yuan breathed out a sigh of relief. This transaction was simply too crucial. The profits would be the key for Fong Yuan to break free of his current problematic situation. Although he knew of many ways to earn immortal essence stones from his previous life's memories, these methods needed time and planning, or involved great risk. The deal with Langya Land's spirit was the only one with little risk, coupled with high rewards. After thinking about it for a while, Fong Yuan left the Cloud Path Immortal Gu, Rising Azure Cloud, in Langya Blessed Land as the collateral of the deal. Rising Azure Cloud was a movement-type Gu. Fang Yuan did not lack a movement immortal Gu, he already had worldly wave trace. The latter was suited for water path Gu immortals, its effect was greater when used in an environment that had rivers, lakes, or the sea. Meanwhile, rising azure cloud's strong point was in ascending and descending, its normal movement speed across places was slower than worldly wave trace. Fang Yuan only cared about practical use, to him, worldly wave trace was much more useful. That night in northern plains, Fang Yuan returned to Hu immortal blessed land alone, while Tai Baiyun Xing stayed in Lanyap blessed land. Fang Yuan was very satisfied with this trip. Although he consumed one bead of green grape immortal essence, under that situation, without knowing the real circumstances inside Lanyap blessed land, he needed to quickly defeat the swamp crab and gain the initiative of the situation. Immortal essence was indeed precious, but it should be used when needed. Immortal essence that was not used had zero value. Not mentioning one bead of green grape immortal essence, even if he had to use 8 or 10, Fang Yuan would use them without hesitation if needed. He concluded that this time, he put in little investment, but made huge gains. Firstly, he took back fixed immortal travel. The return of fixed immortal travel was an extremely pleasant surprise. With fixed immortal travel, Fang Yuan could cross the regional barriers, he could step into all 5 regions. Using the advantage of his rebirth, he could set up schemes everywhere, obtaining the biggest benefits. Even at worst, if Immortal Crane's sect breaks into Hu immortal blessed land and destroys it, Fang Yuan and Tai Baiyun Xing could retreat while bringing along Dang Hun Mountain and Wisdom Gu. They could attack if they progressed, and defend if they retreated. Although fixed immortal travel was a rank 6 movement immortal Gu, it gave Fang Yuan the greatest advantage in this situation. Rising azure cloud and worldly wave trace added together could not achieve something like this. At this point, Fang Yuan felt his pressure reducing. Secondly, he had formed the Snowy Mountain Alliance with He Lulan and Fairy Lishan. He Lulan had the great strength true martial physique, one of the 10 extremes, she had huge potential and once she advances into an immortal, her battle strength would be terrifying. Fairy Lishan was a famous character in Northern Plains, on one hand, she was the 3rd leader of Snowy Mountain Blessed Land, but on the other hand, she had a wide range of friendly relationships, and had dealings with many of Northern Plains' righteous path Gu immortals. There were scumbags and weirdos among righteous path Gu immortals, and the demonic path even more so had its outliers. Every conflict originates from benefits, the righteous and demonic paths were not just enemies out to kill each other. They also cooperated, made transactions, and even worked together secretly. Fairy Lishan had the Mountain Pledge Immortal Gu, this Gu was the reason why she was so popular with everyone. Dong Fang Chang Fan had created an alliance with the righteous forces, he needed Mountain Pledge Gu. Demonic Path Gu immortals were even more suspicious of each other, such a huge organization like Snowy Mountain Blessed Land could be built all because of the foundation of Mountain Pledge Gu. Because the alliance created using Mountain Pledge Gu could not be broken, this was the key to gaining the trust of Demonic Path Gu immortals. Fang Yuan allied with them because on one hand, he could gain powerful assistance, while on the other hand, he could settle his biggest problem of not getting timely updates about information in the world. Fairy Lishan had wide connections, it was much easier for her to gain information compared to Fang Yuan. And thirdly, Fang Yuan obtained the information of 4 immortal Gu. He had snatched them when destroying the formless fists, they were Cleanse Soul, Rising Azure Cloud, Woman's Heart, and Connect Luck. In terms of value, starting from the lowest, the first would be Rising Azure Cloud. To Fang Yuan, this Gu had the least value, he was exerting its greatest use by leaving with Lanya Land Spirit as collateral. Poison Path Immortal Gu Woman's Heart, a one-time expenditure Gu that combined refinement and nurturing, it had slightly greater value. Generally speaking, these one-time use Gu had powerful effects, like the Immortal Gu Gruel Mud. Above Woman's Heart was Immortal Gu Cleanse Soul. Cleanse Soul could refine the soul, its effect was far greater than Fang Yuan's wolf soul Gu. Fang Yuan had guts Gu, it was easy to strengthen his soul. Before he enters Luo Pa Valley, Immortal Gu Cleanse Soul would be the best replacement. In addition, Cleanse Soul was the core Gu of the killer move Miri itself. This had even greater value. Fang Yuan made an evaluation. If he did not use the killer move Miri itself, his battle strength was lower than ordinary rank 6 Gu immortals. But once he used this killer move, his battle strength surged, he would be equivalent to a first-rate rank 6 Gu immortal. Of course, compared to Fang Yuan's blood path battle strength in his previous life, he was still weaker. In Fang Yuan's previous life, he was a demonic path overlord, at the peak of rank 6, and was only a step away from rank 7. His battle strength was truly fearsome, he was at the top of rank 6, he even had the shocking battle result of winning twice against ordinary rank 7 Gu immortals. Last was Connect Luck Immortal Gu. This Luck Path Immortal Gu was unexpectedly Fang Yuan's greatest gain. Its value even surpassed Cleanse Soul. Even though Cleanse Soul was Miri itself's core, it was not irreplaceable. But the importance of Connect Luck Immortal Gu, to Fang Yuan, was simply unique. Fang Yuan's first vital Gu was Spring-Autumn Cicada. This immortal Gu was the cause of his rise. Without this mystical Gu, he would not have reached this stage. But at the same time, this Gu had always been dragging him down. Be it the pressure towards his aperture, or Spring-Autumn Cicada's weakness, the constantly low luck of the user, it gave huge problems to Fang Yuan, and even resulted in many fatal crises. If not for Fang Yuan's ability and ruthless personality, coupled with his many methods, ordinary people in his place would have died long ago. Spring-Autumn Cicada was Fang Yuan's trump card, but it was also his greatest flaw. With Connect Luck Immortal Gu now, it could resolve Spring-Autumn Cicada's luck flaw. Xianxia Land Spirit had provided many uses for the Connect Luck Immortal Gu. The best way was to use other Luck Path Immortal Gu along with it, using them together to link the Gu Master's luck to a famous mountain or river, an immemorial desolate beast, or even blessed lands and grotto heaven. These existences have boundless and long-lived luck, they were not easy to destroy. But Fang Yuan was not going to use this method. Because he could not, he only had one Luck Path Immortal Gu, he could not use it with other Luck Path Immortal Gu. Fang Yuan's method was, to use Connect Luck Immortal Gu to link his luck with other people's luck. Xianxia Land Spirit had earlier said, a person's luck was like a tide, its rises and falls were uncertain. In connecting your luck to others, you had to be careful, otherwise the user would be dragged down at times. If this was used with Break Luck Gu, it would expend precious immortal essence, and it would also force the user to be on constant alert. But this weakness was non-existent to Fang Yuan. Why? Because he was someone who was reborn using Spring-Autumn Cicada. He knew who the lucky, famous, or extremely successful people were of this generation, he even knew what their achievements would be, and when their downfalls would occur. I can totally use my previous life's memories to find these future important people, and use Connect Luck Gu to link my luck with them. Since I have Spring-Autumn Cicada, my luck will always be abysmal. After connecting our lucks, the one taking advantage will always be me. Fang Yuan thought about this and recognized the great advantage that fixed immortal travel gave him even more clearly. If not for fixed immortal travel, he would not be able to freely move between the 5 regions. Where would he have time to travel far and wide to look for those people who were currently still nobodies? The final gain from this trip were the 3 Immortal Gu remnant recipes he brought back from Xianxia Blessed Land. These Immortal Gu recipes had very high completion rates, they were 90% and above, there was even one piece with 99% completion rate. After resting for a while, Fang Yuan arrived at the underground cave. Deducing an Immortal Gu recipe had too many elements to consider, the wills created by Mortal Gu were definitely insufficient. Fang Yuan had no hesitation, he activated Delight in Water and Mountain Gu. He decided to do the easy one first, to settle the remnant recipe with 99%. At the same time, in Xianxia blessed land. Xianxia land spirit, what do you think of my restoration? Tai Bai Yun Sheng's hands were behind his back, he stood before Xianxia land spirit and the Inkman King. Inkman King saw the restored cloud soil as amazement shone in his eyes uncontrollably. Earlier, Tai Bai Yun Sheng had taken the initiative to stay behind. When he had suggested to heal Xianxia blessed land, he did not see much hope. But to think that Tai Bai Yun Sheng did such a great job, the effect was out of his expectations. Xianxia land spirit assessed Tai Bai Yun Sheng for a while, saying, "To think that at such a young age, you are quite impressive. How did you do it?" Tai Bai Yun Sheng laughed bitterly. He was old and had white hair. To hear someone call him young was a really peculiar and weird experience. Discover EW chapters at Novelby.co. He took out landscape as before Immortal Gu, displaying it before the two of them, and introducing it clearly. Inkman King praised loudly, "To think that there is such an amazing Immortal Gu. With this Immortal Gu, we can restore the blessed land's terrain and river flow. It can greatly reduce the losses caused by heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities. This Immortal Gu's value is immense." Xianxia land spirit was also interested. "I have heard of this Immortal Gu, it once belonged to Immortal Jiu Hui. Immortal Jiu Hui had inherited a certain true inheritance from spectral soul demon venerable. Not only did he have landscape as before, he also had man as before. I have not seen this Gu of yours personally. Let me research it. It is bound to give me new inspiration. I will give you 5 immortal essence stones as compensation." Xianxia land spirit had many businesses. He was very rich and did not lack immortal essence stones. 5 immortal essence stones. Tai Bai Yun Sheng hesitated before rejecting and shaking his head. Immortal Gu were one's personal secrets, they should not be exposed easily. But Tai Bai Yun Sheng, for the sake of his future, learned from Fairy Li Shan and had no choice but to expose landscape as before Immortal Gu. How could he hand this to Xianxia land spirit? He said he would research, but what if he ruins it during the process? Seeing that Tai Bai Yun Sheng did not agree, Xianxia land spirit was very disappointed, but he still footed the bill. "You restored all the cloud soil for me, according to our deal. This is 3 immortal essence stones." Tai Bai Yun Sheng waved his hand and rejected, "I will not accept these 3 immortal essence stones. When Fong Yuan comes to hand in the recipe, give it to him along with his compensation." Xianxia land spirit was stunned, before laughing wildly. "What? Don't tell me you believe that the rascal can really succeed and complete the recipe? Haha, do you know how many years these recipes have troubled me? Especially that recipe at 99% completion rate, even my main body could not finish it." Chapter 665, 3 100% Immortal Gu Recipes. Xianxia land spirit, isn't this a little inappropriate? Inkman King glanced at Tai Bai Yun Sheng, as he said this with worry. The other party included the fierce people who wrecked Imperial Court blessed land and toppled 88 True Yang building. Inkman King was very worried Xianxia blessed land would be harmed if Fong and Tai were angered. Xianxia land spirit was extremely frank, and as if he had not heard Inkman King's words, he satisfiedly said, "Humph. That brat is too crafty, he dared to treat this old man in such a vile manner, so I did it on purpose. I am teaching him a lesson to let him understand the principle of respecting the old." Ha ha ha, what Gu recipe can he deduce? What foundation does he have? He is clearly a strength path immortal zombie. Did he think this old man could not see it? Humph, little Tai Bai has blind confidence in him. If he can deduce the Immortal Gu recipe, this old man will personally crush his medicine grinder and eat it. Tai Bai Yun Sheng did not respond, instead looking at the arrogantly laughing Xianxia land spirit with pity. He really wanted to say, "It is not Fong Yuan whom I have confidence in, but the wisdom Gu." Fong Yuan quietly stood within the wisdom light halo. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes, they were shining with joy. Success! He was deeply moved. In a few moments' worth of time, he had deduced the first remnant recipe to 100%. This perfected Gu recipe was the 99% remnant recipe. Fong Yuan gasped in surprise when he looked at this Gu recipe again. This last step was simply mystical. To think this was a Gu recipe I perfected. He himself found it incredulous. Deducing Gu recipes depended on one's foundations and inspirations. If one did not have enough foundation in refinement path, it would be very difficult to deduce Gu recipes. But even Gu masters with deep foundations would often encounter problems when deducing Gu recipes. They would be stopped at these steps, not able to progress even an inch for years. There were even cases where Gu masters would not make any progress for decades or even a century. To break through these barriers would require inspiration. But inspiration was extremely hard to obtain. It could appear continuously over a short period of time or not even appear once in many years. Even if they had inspiration, that was only a possibility and it would have to be tested and verified. If it was successful, that would be true inspiration. If it failed, that would only be an idea, a failed attempt. Wisdom Gus might lies in being able to provide unlimited inspiration to Gu masters. I am a refinement path master, my foundation is enough and I only lack inspiration. Fong Yuan once again sensed the power of a rank 9 Gu. This was still the case in which he had only stepped inside the wisdom light halo. If there came a day when he truly activated Wisdom Gu, who knows what the results would be. Fong Yuan suppressed the flood of thoughts and examined his mind. There were still large amounts of joyful will in his mind. The remnant Gu recipe had been extremely close to completion and had only lacked the final push. Thus, Fong Yuan did not use much joyful will. He concentrated and began deducing another Gu recipe. The second Gu recipe was the immortal Gu remnant recipe with 97% completion. Fong Yuan did not have to consume much joyful will this time around either, only expending 1/3 to cross the barriers that were blocking the completion of the immortal Gu recipe. Crossing these barriers meant resolving the greatest troubles. The thinking process could then smoothly progress with everything else being obvious. Fong Yuan could deduce them completely even if he relied only on his own ability. But at the third immortal Gu recipe, Fong Yuan encountered slight trouble. He had to use up 3 beads of green grape immortal essence in a row before he was able to perfect this immortal Gu recipe. The difficulty of this immortal Gu recipe was quite high. When one problem was solved, another would appear. Thus, even though its completion rate was already as high as 96%, the amount of green grape immortal essence expended to deduce it was 2 to 3 times as much as than the previous 2. But even so, when considering the deal, Fong Yuan profited hugely. Fong Yuan hurriedly connected to Treasure Yellow Heaven and contacted Xianxia Land Spirit with Divine Sense Gu. Xianxia Land Spirit laughed wildly and was thinking Fong Yuan had made contact to admit defeat. So when Fong Yuan handed him a 100% complete immortal Gu recipe, he was stunned for a while. After a few breaths of time, all his attention was absorbed into the contents of the immortal Gu recipe. Amazing, amazing! This barrier could actually be broken in such way. Why didn't I think of it? How could I not have thought about it? He shouted. Were it not for both his hands being trapped in the Chi Path seal, he would probably be slapping his thigh fiercely. The praise suddenly stopped, and an embarrassed expression showed on Xianxia Land Spirit's face. He had not forgotten that a short while ago he had been extremely pessimistic of Fong Yuan's ability. How could he have expected Fong Yuan would hand over a completed immortal Gu recipe to him not long after? Xianxia Land Spirit felt embarrassed, muttering, "Brat, who could have thought that your line of thought is so weird, you actually hit the target while blindfolded, and wildly deduced this immortal Gu recipe. Consider it your luck this time, according to our contract, perfecting a rank 6 Immortal Gu remnant recipe of a 90% or over completion rate will be paid with 10 Immortal Essence stones. Should I hand them to you using Treasure Yellow Heaven, or will you come personally to take them? Transactions in Treasure Yellow Heaven naturally required a fixed service charge. But Fong Yuan would have to use fixed immortal travel if he went to personally receive the payment. And every activation of fixed immortal travel required 1 bead of green grape immortal essence. It was a considerable price. Fong Yuan thought it over. Using Treasure Yellow Heaven would mean a cheaper cost, but it was hard to avoid leaving behind some traces which might be deduced by some wisdom path Gu immortals with harmful intentions. But personally going to take them would mean too high of a cost. Fong Yuan was somewhat troubled. Xianxia Blessed Land was in northern plains while Hu Immortal Blessed Land was in central continent. The two were not in the same region, so using Whole Earth Gu was not possible. Only Stargate Gu could be used. Land Spirit, with your personality, you should have Stargate Gu there, right? Fong Yuan asked. Hee, brat, you really understand me. Xianxia Land Spirit frankly admitted. Get the L. Test. V. ls at .o/v/e/lbi. Fong Yuan nodded and transmitted his thoughts. Treasure Yellow Heaven is not safe. Our transaction will be sensed by many, and once the frequency of this increases, it will bring us great trouble. Fixed immortal travel is convenient, but the price to use it is too high. It is better for us to link our 2 blessed lands and establish a Stargate. Build a Stargate? Xianxia Land Spirit shook his head and refused Fong Yuan's suggestion without consideration. Brat, I have been deceived many times by you. Building a Stargate is not a small thing. Any calamity over your side will immediately afterwards be directed here as well. If Xianxia Blessed Land is discovered by someone, my life will be difficult. Fong Yuan laughed loudly and did not attempt to persuade him, instead handing over the second Immortal Gu recipe. You actually completed another one? Xianxia Land Spirit received a huge shock. This speed, wasn't it simply too fast? This method of resolving the problem is simply marvelous. You actually thought of using this Gu, and there is also refinement Gu material like intimate grass. How did you think of them? Xianxia Land Spirit chattered on and exclaimed as he appreciated the wonders of this 100% completed Immortal Gu recipe. Ha, old man, the new generation replaces the old. You are already old and stay all day in Xianxia Blessed Land without knowing the developments in the outside world. Even if you have your best friend, Inkman King, he is an Inkman, how could he come across the key aspects of human cultivation? Moreover, who am I? I am a peerless genius of wisdom path. One day, I will surpass star constellation Immortal Venerable. Fong Yuan laughed arrogantly while spouting nonsense. Xianxia Land Spirit was dumbfounded. He really wanted to retort, but the truth was right in front of his eyes. The 2 Immortal Gu remnant recipes which had troubled him for countless years were solved so easily by Fong Yuan. Fong Yuan suddenly heaved a sigh. Do you know the loneliness of a genius? Since my birth, I knew I was extraordinary. There was no one around who could have an equal conversation with me. Some people even believed I was a monster. They were afraid of my wisdom and envied my talent. I could only hide myself and appear to be like a normal person. It was to the extent that no one could see that I was overflowing with heaven-defying talent. Wisdom path seemed to be the path the heaven arranged for me, but from a twist of fate, I ended up becoming a strength path immortal zombie. Tell me, isn't my life full of setbacks? Even heaven was envious of my talents. Xianxia Land Spirit could no longer bear to listen to this, stamping his foot. Hey brat, don't be so self-important. What is amazing about deducing 2 Immortal Gu recipes? If you are really a genius, then deduce the final Immortal Gu recipe, only then will this old man admire you. Fong Yuan was silent. Xianxia Land Spirit raised his head. Kid, this old man admits you have some talent. But so what? Even my main body was stumped by that final immortal goo recipe. Ponder over it properly for 7 to 8 years, maybe you will know how profound this world is and how many stars there are in the sky. You will then learn to be humble, ahahaha. You mean, this immortal goo recipe? The corners of Fong Yuan's lips pulled back as he tossed out the third immortal goo recipe. This was simply the final blow. Langya Land's spirit's laughter came to an abrupt stop. Shortly afterwards, he shouted in shock, what is this? What in the world is this? His voice contained a trace of panic. Fong Yuan heaved a long sigh and said with a slow, sad voice, I said it earlier, my talents often provokes fear and envy. Sigh, nothing can be done, I am such a genius, I was born this way. Langya Land's spirit's panic this time was no small thing. He was only formed from an obsession and was not shrewd. This final immortal goo recipe was a huge impact to him. You really succeeded in deducing it? Incredible. Incredible. This immortal goo recipe can actually be solved like this. Your train of thought went in a completely different direction. No wonder even my main body could not deduce it. This old saying has come true, the mountain road twists around every new peak, a glimmer of hope shines at one's darkest hour. The mountain road twists around every new peak, a glimmer of hope shines at one's darkest hour. Langya Land's spirit kept on mumbling to himself. He was at first completely shocked before becoming ecstatic. Finally he calmed down, his heart filled with frustration. This immortal goo recipe had been perplexing him all along and even his main body was stumped, unable to take the final crucial step. Sometimes Langya Land's spirit even thought that this immortal goo recipe was a complete dead end and there was no way for it to be resolved. He had given it to Fong Yuan to deliberately make things difficult, and had never imagined it would truly be solved. However, he obtained the complete recipe now. The problem he and even his main body could not resolve, was solved by Fong Yuan. His heart could not help but feel frustration and listlessness. Chapter 666, Huge Profit. Chapter 666, Huge Profit. Don't tell me that this kid truly is a wisdom path genius, one rarely seen in 100 years. No, such ability and wisdom is heaven-defying. This talent is not just rarely seen in 100 years, there might not be one in 1,000 years or even 10,000 years. When he thought of this, Langya Land's spirit immediately felt there was some sense in Fong Yuan's repulsive character. Right, only a genius like this can have such a repulsive character. Like my main body. Langya Land's spirit started to feel Fong Yuan's repulsive character was no longer so disagreeable, and even felt a sense of appreciation for similar talents. At Hu Immortal Blessed Land, Fong Yuan was calm and unruffled. He might have become a zombie and his thoughts might have slowed down, but it was still more than enough to bully a land spirit. If it were possible, Fong Yuan did not want to take such risks. He would rather hand over the immortal goo recipes one by one over long intervals, and not directly provide the 3 immortal goo recipes like he was doing now. This action was too eye-catching, it was sure to attract doubts and suspicions from others. Langya Land's spirit was frank and open, but he still had a good friend called Inkman King. This variant human was a genuinely formidable character. But Fong Yuan could do nothing about it, as the situation was forcing him. He must earn a large number of immortal essence stones in a short period of time and increase his strength, both to break through the current perils he was facing, and also to delay the time before he was exposed. If he worries over this and that, holding back on releasing the immortal goo recipes, who would Fong Yuan cry to if this led to his defeat and death? Fong Yuan smiled. Langya Land's spirit had not responded, but he knew, these 3 immortal goo recipes were tossed out one by one like 3 bombs, they had already shaken Langya Land's spirit's mind. This was a good time to talk about conditions. Therefore, he spoke, Langya Land's spirit, I will speak frankly with you. I need immortal essence stones and you need immortal goo recipes, we will be collaborating a lot in the future. Building a Stargate will be beneficial to both of us. Stargate. This time, Xianxia Land Spirit hesitated and did not immediately refuse. Fang Yuan displayed his exceptional talent in Wisdom Path, which caused Xianxia Land Spirit to have a newfound respect for Fang Yuan. Thus, the Land Spirit began to pay serious attention to Fang Yuan's suggestion. Fang Yuan persuaded again, Land Spirit, do you think your Xianxia blessed land will be safe just because we don't build a Stargate? Don't forget, you have already suffered from 3 waves of attacks, every wave stronger than the previous. No doubt, Xianxia blessed land's location has already been discovered, you are already being observed by some great force. After we build a Stargate, we can even take this collaboration to the next step, at crucial times, I could come to protect you through the Stargate. Protect me. Xianxia Land Spirit was finally moved. He thought of the impressive battle scene when Fang Yuan beat down the swamp crab, it was truly a formidable display. Moreover, these 3 waves of attacks had completely disrupted Xianxia blessed land's peaceful environment, creating an enormous sense of danger in Xianxia Land Spirit. Fang Yuan asked at this time, you haven't sold Stargate Gu at Treasure Yellow Heaven, right? Not yet, I have no lack of immortal essence stones. Xianxia Land Spirit replied. Fang Yuan laughed brightly, this is even better. Stargate Gu is a new innovation, it is not like whole earth Gu which has to be planted on the ground and therefore discovered easily. You would need to activate Stargate Gu every time you want to open a Stargate, thus it is very hidden. Even if you feel something wrong, you can destroy the Stargate Gu in your hands at the crucial moment, won't that work? There is simply no threat in building a Stargate. Fang Yuan talked glibly, his words impacting on the depths of Xianxia Land Spirit's heart. Xianxia Land Spirit finally agreed, alright, we will build a Stargate. But let's put the collaboration aside for now, and first handle the transaction of deducing immortal Gu recipes. The Land Spirit added another sentence, I will be in charge of refining the Stargate Gu, I will lend it to you. With this, he would be in greater control of the situation, after all he still felt a little uneasy. Over at Hu Immortal Blessed Land, Fang Yuan exposed the smile of a winner and clenched his 8 fists in joy. Success! With this, he had attained initial approval of collaboration with Xianxia Land Spirit, connecting to Xianxia Blessed Land would make future transactions much profitable. Not only could it save some money, it would also give an additional retreat path. Besides this, Fang Yuan was able to prevent the supply of Stargate Gu to Treasure Yellow Heaven's market, which could have given huge advantages to other Gu immortals. Xianxia Land Spirit provided the Stargate Gu, which also saved Fang Yuan some trouble. If Xianxia Land Spirit could feel safe with this, Fang Yuan was happy to comply. I must form a good relationship with Xianxia Land Spirit. I won't be cheated by doing transactions with him, and can also earn large amounts of immortal essence stones. As long as I handle this relationship properly and continue to deepen it, who knows, one day Xianxia Land Spirit might lend me some immortal Gu to use. Fang Yuan calculated inwardly. Xianxia Blessed Land contained many immortal Gu, among them were Beast Enslavement Immortal Gu and Heavenly Essence Treasure Imperial Lotus. By borrowing immortal Gu, Fang Yuan would be able to save a large expense in nurturing them. How cost-effective was it? Fang Yuan was taking 1 step but had already planned the next 10 steps. Xianxia Land Spirit was also very happy, feeling his luck was truly good for finding a wisdom path genius rarely seen in 10,000 years. All the immortal Gu remnant recipes in his possession had hopes of being perfected. Fang Yuan had intended to receive Stargate Gu through Treasure Yellow Heaven, but the cautious Xianxia Land Spirit refused. Fang Yuan could only use Green Grape Immortal Essence and make a trip to Xianxia Blessed Land to take the Stargate Gu. Tai Bai Yunxing still remained there as there were still several rivers in the Blessed Land that he needed to restore. The round trip, as a result, cost Fang Yuan 2 green grape immortal essence. But with this journey, he brought back 1 Stargate Gu, 3 new immortal Gu remnant recipes and also 30 immortal essence stones. Tai Bai Yunsheng wanted Fang Yuan to take the 3 immortal essence stones he was being paid, but Fang Yuan refused and left it to Tai Bai Yunsheng. After all, Tai Bai Yunsheng also required cultivation resources. The stronger he became, the more help he would be to Fang Yuan compared to 3 immortal essence stones. The Stargate could not be immediately built. Fang Yuan did not have any more Starlight Firefly Gu. Without the starlight from Starlight Firefly Gu, the 2 Stargates were unable to be activated. Fang Yuan summarized the transaction this time. He used a total of 5 beads of green grape immortal essence to deduce immortal Gu recipes. When he returned alone from Langya Blessed Land earlier, he used up 1 bead of green grape immortal essence. To take 1 Stargate Gu, he had to go to Langya Blessed Land and return back to Hu Immortal Blessed Land, consuming 2 green grape immortal essence beads. He had invested altogether 8 beads of green grape immortal essence. And his gains were a whole 30 immortal essence stones. I have only 9 green grape immortal essence remaining now. Fang Yuan had formed a middle-grade blessed land and the few green grape immortal essence he had obtained were heavily used up in this back and forth trip from northern plains. However, Fang Yuan was not anxious. He had become a zombie and his immortal aperture was dead, no longer able to produce green grape immortal essence by itself. But he could extract immortal essence from immortal essence stones and turn them into his own green grape immortal essence. Back then, first Gen Gu Yu, who had turned into a blood white, also used primeval stones to recover his primeval essence. The logic between the two was the same, it was only a difference of ranks. That is to say, Fang Yuan could use up all these 30 immortal essence stones to turn into his own green grape immortal essence. 1 immortal essence stone could be treated as 1 bead of green grape immortal essence, which meant the amount of his green grape immortal essence had increased to 39 beads. But immortal essence stones are worth more than green grape immortal essence, the former is used as currency while the latter can only be used by an individual. Unless necessary, I should not rashly refine these immortal essence stones to green grape immortal essence. Anyway, as long as I can continue transacting with Langya Land Spirit, I will have more and more immortal essence stones. Now, let's connect to Treasure Yellow Heaven and check. Fang Yuan was full of confidence when connecting to Treasure Yellow Heaven this time. The purchasing power of immortal essence stones was extremely strong. Back then, Fang Yuan used 1 immortal essence stone to buy a myriad wolf king and a wolf group with over 30,000 wolves. 30 immortal essence stones were sufficient to be called a large sum. In his previous life, Fang Yuan had established the Bloodwing Demon sect and as a demonic path overlord, the greatest amount of immortal essence stones he had at one time was also no more than 64. Naturally, he spent a lot in his previous life. This number was the result of his expenditure and profits constantly offsetting each other. Fang Yuan sat down and closed his eyes, sending his consciousness towards his immortal aperture. The immortal aperture was a scene of deathly stillness, the sky was gray and the ground was black, and the air was filled with a putrid odor. Mo Yao's will was still imprisoned inside, monitored from time to time by Fang Yuan. The mirror willow planted earlier had already died, becoming a collapsed pile of rotten wood on the ground. With a shift of Fang Yuan's mind, a new connecting heaven Gu fluttered up to the air in his immortal aperture and formed a passage to Treasure Yellow Heaven. Fang Yuan then activated Divine Sense Gu, forming a continuous stream of divine sense which followed the passage created by connecting heaven Gu and entered Treasure Yellow Heaven. He was now an immortal zombie, no longer needing the help of Little Who Immortal, and could make transactions himself. Visit NOV.C/M for the L. treasure yellow heaven was still the same, the vast space rippling with lemon-like yellow light. There were no mountains, rivers or forests, and also no birds, beasts, insects or fish. There was not even a sky or ground. The only things here was all sorts of treasures and goods. Gu worms, Gu recipes, killer moves, beast groups, variant humans, vegetation, or veins, soil, water, fine wine and all sorts of goods. Each of them quietly floated in air, releasing all sorts of colors, giving off large or small treasure light. The brighter and larger the treasure light was, the more the good was worth. But treasure light was only an initial estimation. One might not be able to infer from the treasure light if the item was tampered by the Gu immortals or not. This was the largest exchange market among the 5 regions Gu immortals. It allowed for bargaining, while taking a fixed service charge. This also tested the Gu immortals' discernment skills. If they bought counterfeit goods, they could only blame their bad luck, as treasure yellow heaven would not be liable for any loss. Fong Yuan wanted to buy Starlight Firefly Gu first. This type of Gu worm emitted pure azure starlight. It was a prerequisite for activating a stargate. His divine sense searched around and soon found a large group of Starlight Firefly Gu. There were over 1,000. Fong Yuan was familiar with the seller. It was Star Lord Wanxiang. Star Lord Wanxiang seemed to be Star Path Gu immortal. He not only sold Starlight Firefly Gu, but also Star Dart Gu, Stellar Fire Gu, Falling Meteor Gu, Star River Gu and so on. It was obvious that Star Lord Wanxiang's blessed land produced Star Path Mortal Gu, and he sold these Gu worms to generate revenue. Even Gu immortals who did not cultivate Star Path would often buy some Star Path Gu worms for refining, researching killer moves or other purposes. Chapter 667, 8-Arm Immortal, Spring Star Rain. How much are you selling this group of Starlight Firefly Gu for? Fong Yuan's divine sense sent over. How may I address you, sir, and how many Starlight Firefly Gu do you need? Although Star Lord Wanxiang was not around, he left behind a will near his goods. Visit NOV. Ulbin.c/m for the L. Test updates. But this will could be seen to have a great appearance. It was dazzling like the stars, extremely appealing to the eyes. Fong Yuan's wisdom path attainment was low. He did not recognize its origins. You can call me 8-Arm Immortal. I want to buy this entire group of Starlight Firefly Gu. Fong Yuan transmitted. Fong Yuan was using his own blessed land to connect to treasure yellow heaven, and he had also changed his divine sense Gu and connecting heaven Gu. Thus Star Lord Wanxiang did not realize that Fong Yuan was the former Fox Immortal. He thought Fong Yuan was a stranger. But listening to Fong Yuan's tone, he seemed like a big spending customer. Thus Star Lord Wanxiang's will immediately became enthusiastic. Starlight Firefly Gu is an olden antiquity Gu worm. Now it is almost extinct. My Starlight Firefly Gu are in excellent condition, and I have over 1,200 of them. How about this? I will sell them to you at a price of 4 immortal essence stones. Fong Yuan laughed. You're trying to scam me. Don't think I am unaware of the normal selling price. I was introduced to you by someone, thus I came here. You are not the only one selling Starlight Firefly Gu. There is still Fairy Yaoguang and Di Yuan. I can get the Starlight Firefly Gu from them as well. Fong Yuan had once instructed Little Hu Immortal to deal with all 3 of these Gu immortals. Not only did he buy over 100,000 Starlight Fireflies, as well as their food, Star Fragment Grass, he also bought the experiences of the 3 of them in planting Star Fragment Grass. He spent a lot. Star Lord Wanxiang's will was slightly startled. He now knew Fong Yuan was well aware of the market rate. His words changed. He, I was kidding earlier. Don't take it seriously, Sir 8-Arm Immortal. Fong Yuan interrupted him, saying, I will pay 2 immortal essence stones to buy 1,500 Starlight Firefly Gu. Star-Lord Xiang immediately rejected this, saying, "Sir, this is simply too low, I cannot sell it at this price." After some bargaining, both of them took a step back. Using 3 immortal essence stones, he obtained 1,200 Starlight Firefly Gu. After buying the Starlight Firefly Gu, he did not leave. Instead he asked, "Do you sell any Star Path killer moves? Could it be that Sir is also a Star Path Gu immortal?" He, of course I sell them, take a look. I have 3 Star Path killer moves here. Fong Yuan started browsing. The first Star Path killer move was called Dazzling Star Armor. It needed large numbers of Starlight Gu, a few Bane Star Gu, several Star Shield Gu and so on to be activated. This was a defensive killer move. Once used, a full body armor would form on the Gu immortal's body, shining like starlight. The second killer move was called Spring Star Rain. It needed large numbers of Star Rain Gu, small numbers of Spring Wind Gu, some Star Shoot Gu and others. Once used, it would form a jade-colored rain, drizzling non-stop for 3 days and 3 nights. The rain would be rich like oil, it could provide nutrients to crops and greatly increase productivity. This killer move was used to nurture plants, and manage the blessed land. The third was called Spiral Drill Star Spear. Like the name implied, it was an offensive killer move. It needed small numbers of Spiral Bone Spear Gu, several Star River Gu, countless Star Dart Gu, and large numbers of Shooting Star Gu. These killer moves' details were very interesting. The numbers of Gu worms were usually classified into large numbers, several, some, and a few, vague terms like these without actual real numbers. At the same time, the ways to construct these killer moves were also not specified, including the sequences of activating the Gu worms, as well as the relationships between different Gu worms. Only the general statuses of the killer moves were mentioned, like what rank 5 Gu were needed, and what effects the killer moves had. Only after the killer moves were bought would their details be clearly stated. Star-Lord Xiang spoke at an appropriate time. Killer move Dazzling Star Armor is sold at half an immortal essence stone. Spring Star Rain was created by my main body personally, only a few Gu immortals have bought it now, thus the value is slightly higher at 1.5 immortal essence stones. Spiral Drill Star Spear costs 1 immortal essence stone. Killer moves were priced according to their rarity, flaws, strength and power, backlash, whether they can be easily countered, and the conditions of the Gu worms that compose the killer move. But they had one common point, they were usually not cheap. In Treasure Yellow Heaven, ordinary mortal killer moves were priced higher than mortal Gu recipes of the same rank. But at rank 6 and above, the price of immortal killer moves were far less than immortal Gu recipes. Dazzling Star Armor, Fong Yuan knew this killer move even though he was not a Star Path Gu immortal, it was extremely common. Half an immortal essence stone was too expensive. Fong Yuan had planned to buy a Star Path offensive killer move. He remembered a mortal killer move called Icy Stardust. This killer move had a wide range, the Star Path Gu worms that were used in it were common, and it was also very effective in dealing with enemies. The Stardust had defense-piercing ability, and even if it could not break the defense, it would stick to enemies and emit frost energy that would slow them down. As for Star-Lord Xiang's Spiral Drill Star Spear, Fong Yuan had not heard of it. This meant that this offensive killer move's value was not high. In the 500 years of Fong Yuan's previous life, during the chaotic 5 Regions War, the war ruined old and inefficient systems, causing the birth of many new inventions. Fong Yuan did not remember Spiral Drill Star Spear, that meant it was not outstanding, it had been out of use since long ago back then. A killer move that was out of use definitely had many weaknesses. But the Spring Star Rain killer move made Fong Yuan's eyes shine. This was a surprising find. Fong Yuan thought of the Star Fragment Grass, it was the food of the Starlight Fireflies, as well as their home. The stronger and larger the starlight fireflies, the more starlight firefly goo could emerge from them. Fang Yuan's desire toward starlight firefly goo was going to persist for a long time. He needed this killer move. Fang Yuan looked over this spring star rain killer move another 2 times. He noticed a problem. The goo worms that made up this spring star rain had one star path goo worm called star shoot goo. It was a consumable goo. Fang Yuan had never heard of this goo, this was the first time he had heard of it. Fang Yuan thought about it and realized, this was Star Lord Wanxiang's ploy. After Goo Immortals bought the killer move, Spring Star Rain, every time they wanted to use it, they would need to expend Star Shoot Goo. Meanwhile, only Star Lord Wanxiang sold this Star Shoot Goo. Star Lord Wanxiang wanted to turn this one-time killer move purchase into a continuous trade. Fang Yuan probed and asked, I will offer 2 immortal essence stones for your Spring Star Rain killer move and the Star Shoot Goo's recipe. Star Shoot Goo was only rank 3, such a mortal goo recipe was not worth half an immortal essence stone, this price was extremely high. But as expected, Star Lord Wanxiang rejected him without hesitation. His explanation was that this Star Shoot Goo was naturally formed in his blessed land, there was no recipe. This was a really good excuse. Some blessed lands, if managed well, due to the peculiarity of the environment, would give birth to new goo. Not only can goo immortals refine and create new goo worms, nature could do the same. Fang Yuan knew that this was very likely to be an excuse, but he could not request to enter Star Lord Wanxiang's blessed land to check. The blessed land was the Goo Immortals' headquarters, it involved their most private matters. Only if they had a really good relationship and trusted each other deeply would they invite another Goo Immortal into the blessed land. Fang Yuan saw that Star Lord Wanxiang was unwilling, thus he suggested, alright, I will pay 2 immortal essence stones to buy Spring Star Rain and Dazzling Star Armor, these 2 killer moves along with some Star Shoot Goo. I want enough Star Shoot Goo to activate Spring Star Rain 10 times. Star Lord Wanxiang heard this and shook his head, the expenditure of Star Shoot Goo for 6 uses of the killer move would be worth half an immortal essence stone. Sir is only offering 2 immortal essence stones, yet I have to provide Dazzling Star Armor as well. This is a loss for me, I will not do it. Fang Yuan snickered, Star Shoot Goo is only a rank 3 mortal goo, each activation only uses about 500 at most. Activating the killer move 6 times would consume 3 to 4,000 of them, you are selling that for half an immortal essence stone. Sir might not know, Star Shoot Goo is naturally created in my blessed land, its production is very slow. It cannot be bought outside because it is a unique product of my myriad star blessed land. Star Lord Wanxiang was very courteous, but his underlying meaning was, buy it if you want to, but if you do not buy it, you will not find it elsewhere. He had the confidence of dominating the market of this goo. Fang Yuan laughed, continuing to bargain, while the other party refused to relent. During this process, he realized that in the other party's mind, Dazzling Star Armor's value was still very high. It seems that before the War of the 5 Regions, Dazzling Star Armor had not been spread by the respective forces, thus this killer move's value is still very high. War was a very efficient method of interaction. Especially in this world. During peacetime, primeval stones, immortal essence stones, all these had great value and could not become widely used currency, the economy could not prosper. But during times of war, battle merits, sect contribution points, all these replaced primeval stones and immortal essence stones as currency, they pushed for the development of all aspects of the economy. After realizing this, Fang Yuan stopped being forceful. He used 2 immortal essence stones to buy Spring Star Rain and enough Star Shoot Goo to activate the killer move 10 times. After completing this transaction, Fang Yuan continued to search in Treasure Yellow Heaven. He found out that in Treasure Yellow Heaven, Gu immortals had increased air bubble fish's price up to at least 10 times that of before. Fang Yuan investigated for a bit and realized that the situation was the same as in his memories. During the end of last year, 2 Gu immortals had fought above air bubble sea, causing intense poison to spread in the sea, turning it into a death zone. Rare goods were more expensive, with the production of air bubble fish falling drastically, the price naturally shot up. The 5 regions have regional walls that isolate one another. This causes them to have their own independent events, and they barely influence one another. Since rebirth, I have affected southern border, northern plains and central continent. Among them, northern plains' influence was the largest. It is now a huge mess. Second was central continent, followed by southern border. After all, what I changed in southern border were only events at the mortal level. As for western desert and eastern sea, they are still the same. Using spring-autumn cicada, Fang Yuan learnt about the inertia of the river of time as well as the butterfly effect. This sort of lack of change and change interweave together. It was evident that Fang Yuan's understanding towards this world's law of time was becoming deeper. As for air bubble fish, Fang Yuan remembered that during the 5 regions war, this fish group would be extremely popular among Gu immortals. The price would be even higher than now. That was because an air bubble fish group could boost the rate of mortal Gu appearing in insect groups. Chapter 668, Little Immortal Xing Luo. During peacetime, Gu immortals raised Gu. Their demand to purchase large quantities of mortal Gu was not high. Purchasing was a secondary option. In most cases, the primary method was the Blessed Land's own production. The time flow was different in blessed lands compared to the outside world. One day in the outside world was many days inside the blessed land. 1 year outside would mean many years in a blessed land, while each year, there would be a certain output harvested. Gu immortals would normally not choose air bubble fish, because the price was too high. They would rather simply wait for some time. But during wartime, when Gu immortals frequently fought against each other, they would avoid using their immortal Gu trump cards often. Mortal Gu would be the common method of attacking, and their expenditure would be huge. Thus, air bubble fish became a sought-after commodity among all Gu immortals during the 5 regions war. In fact, Fang Yuan had once bought air bubble fish to increase the production of his starlight firefly Gu. But unfortunately, towards the end of his northern plains trip, he lacked money. Thus he had to sell almost all of his wolf group, fox group, and large numbers of air bubble fish and hairy men. Fang Yuan had a chance to profit from air bubble fish, but life was full of unexpected changes. Because he sold them too soon, he made a loss instead. Right now in Hu Immortal Blessed Land, there were very few air bubble fish. I still have to buy air bubble fish, but not now. In a few years, air bubble sea would be repaired, and the price of air bubble fish will be lower. By then, I will invest some immortal essence stones and buy a huge group of them. Maybe I should breed these air bubble fish in large numbers, so that during the 5 regions war, I can make a huge profit. Fang Yuan had just bought over 1,000 starlight firefly Gu. They could last him for a long time. He was not in need of air bubble fish to boost their production. Are you little immortal Xing Luo? A moment later, Fang Yuan found his target. Coincidentally, his target was also looking at Yellow Treasure Heaven. That would be me. Senior, what would you like to buy? The price is negotiable. Little immortal Xing Luo's divine sense transmitted. It was quite enthusiastic, even as much as having a tone of flattery. Fang Yuan looked. The goods she was selling were not only small in quantity, they were very common. Almost nobody would pay attention to her. She was evidently quite poor. She was indeed a Gu immortal, but not all Gu immortals were wealthy. Battle, refining Gu, research, undergoing tribulation, all these would greatly expend the Gu immortal's foundation and wealth. Fang Yuan knew from his memories, this little immortal Xing Luo was a lone cultivator, a newly advanced female Gu immortal with weak foundations. She was at the toughest part of her career in starting her trading. Little immortal Xing Luo was a huge figure in the mortal realm, she would be revered and respected by mortals. But in Treasure Yellow Heaven, among the many Gu immortals, she was not outstanding at all. But who would know, during the Five Regions War, this little immortal Xing Luo would starting shining brightly, using her killer move Icy Stardust to quickly accumulate wealth from battle, becoming quite the famous figure later on. Fong Yuan sighed and admired the mystical powers of time and destiny. According to the prophecy of the Three Venerables, the Five Regions War was the start of the Great Era, when this generation's great dream immortal venerable would be born. The Great Era where each rank 9 Gu immortal was born had a common point, that was during the chaotic battles, large numbers of new Gu immortals would rise up. The new replaces the old, the waves of an era would cause brilliantly shining ripples. Among paths, forces, individuals, they would collide and interact, causing the way of Gu to develop at a rapid pace. It would be an era of change. Fong Yuan was one of them. He started off with Blood Path, becoming a central continent Gu immortal. But unfortunately, he had only experienced the first half of this new era before he had to use Spring-Autumn Cicada to self-detonate. Do you sell killer moves? Putting his mood aside, Fong Yuan asked little immortal Xing Luo. I have one killer move here. Little immortal Xing Luo was a bit embarrassed. This is an Ice Path killer move that I obtained coincidentally, it is called Icy Yarn. Its price is half an immortal essence stone, this is the lowest price for a rank 5 killer move. Her last sentence showed her fear of Fong Yuan suppressing the price. Fong Yuan took a look at the content, humming in discontent. This Icy Yarn killer move needs so many rank 5 Gu, and the defense is a wide-range defensive effect. To use large numbers of rank 5 Gu at once, the user had to be a Gu immortal. Mortals have limited primeval essence and could not do that in most cases. A wide area defense meant that the defensive strength would be lower than a single target defensive killer move. Meanwhile, Gu immortals often fought alone, unless they were enslavement path Gu immortals. But enslavement path Gu immortals had their own enslavement path defensive methods. Why would they choose an ice path killer move? Little immortal Xing Luo laughed bitterly in her heart. Fong Yuan hit the nail on the head. Because of these reasons, the killer move Icy Yarn was not easy to sell. But little immortal Xing Luo had no choice. She had limited goods in her possession, and she was a lone cultivator. She needed huge amounts of resources to kickstart her cultivation. Although she became a Gu immortal, she was left penniless after the tribulation. Most of her Gu worms were destroyed. She had made an elaborate development plan. She wanted to plant a vast number of shiver trees in her blessed land. Her blessed land's environment was very suitable to grow shiver trees, but she lacked the most crucial startup fund. She had billions of primeval stones in her possession, but not a single immortal essence stone. The sellers of shiver tree seeds numbered in only a few people. Most of them wanted specific items for trade, or immortal essence stones. They had no need for the stuff that little immortal Xing Luo had. Hearing Fong Yuan say that, little immortal Xing Luo's heart lost all hope. After the last few months, she had gotten used to disappointment. But the next moment, Fong Yuan said, I am researching star path killer moves recently. I am a little interested in this Icy Yarn killer move. But half an immortal essence stone is too expensive. If you have any innovative small killer move, add it in and I might buy this for half an immortal essence stone. Innovative small killer move. Little immortal Xing Luo's hopes were reignited. She thought about her own star path killer move, 6-9 Stardust. 6-9 Stardust was her personal creation. It used 6 rank 3 Gu and 9 rank 4 Gu, but could unleash the attack power of a rank 5 Gu. She had once been extremely proud of it, but soon her horizons broadened, and she understood that there was a mountain above a mountain, a man above another man. She became more modest. Little immortal Xing Luo only hesitated for a moment. Her desire towards immortal essence stones had won her over. Junior has a small killer move, but I'm afraid it might be useless to Senior. She said carefully. Fong Yuan's heart jumped, but his tone was still very calm. Oh. Tell me about it. After seeing the 6-9 Stardust killer move, Fong Yuan held in his joy and evaluated, this killer move is barely acceptable, who knows, it might bring me some inspiration. Well, since my mood is great today, I'll take care of a newbie like you. Hahaha, this is half an immortal essence stone. I finally have half a piece, I'm just half short. Little immortal Xing Luo was overjoyed. When they parted, her tone was full of well wishes for Fong Yuan. Afterwards, Fong Yuan spent another 2 immortal essence stones, buying large amounts of Gu refinement material and mortal Gu worms. After spending another 2 stones, he bought a group of elderly hairy men. Hairy men were almost always the most expensive among slaves. These hairy men, although they were old and would die in a few years, were very experienced in Gu refinement. Fong Yuan had intended to refine a few sets of Stargate Gu, but this Gu's success rate was very low. Back then, even though Xianxia Land Spirit refined it himself, he still failed many times. If Fong Yuan tried, it would waste a huge amount of his time. He was going to let these old hairy men refine it for him. Central Continent, Immortal Crane Sect, Fu Hu Blessed Land. Fong Zheng had a solemn expression as he stepped into the tunnel. The tunnel was huge and wide. Every 100 steps, there would be an elite rockman guard. The defense was like an iron fortress. These rockmen were all trained by the Blessed Land's owner. All of them had at least rank for battle strength and were skilled in Earth Path Gu worms. Every 1,000 steps, there would be a huge rockman. His size would be at least 3 times that of a normal rockman. Even in such a wide tunnel, they could only squat down on the ground. But rockmen were born to dig tunnels and live underground. These rockmen did not feel any discomfort. Every time Fong Zheng walked in this tunnel, he would feel apprehensive. Especially when he could feel the rank 5 Gu Master aura permeating from these huge rockmen. Our immortal crane sect's strength is simply too great. If these rank 5 rockmen were all brought outside, I'm afraid all the other sects would be shocked. While he passed a huge rockman, Fong Zheng muttered to the spirit incubating flea. Lord Sky Crane, who was inside the spirit incubating flea, said, "Not really. Which sect would not have their trump cards and foundation? Especially the other 9 great ancient sects, they are no weaker than us. But the current owner of Fu Hu Blessed Land is the 3rd supreme elder of our sect, Lord Tiger Demon. The rockman slaves that he nurtures are the best in Central Continent. Even in Treasure Yellow Heaven he has huge influence. His wealth and abilities are not something us mortals can begin to imagine." Fong Zheng's heart had a longing feeling. What sort of realm is Gu immortal? They can actually rear so many rock men. This is truly amazing. Lord Sky Crane replied, "Each Gu immortal is an elite of the elites, an absolute genius, a dragon among men. They all have great opportunities and chance encounters. They have all cultivated step by step from a mortal identity. Fong Zheng, you are rank 5 now, maybe one day, you will become a Gu immortal." Fong Zheng shook his head continuously. "Master, I know my limits. My rank 5 cultivation was mostly due to the sect's relic Gu. The sect is nurturing me with all its effort, using the resources on me. My rank 5 cultivation cannot compare to you, Master, who cultivated step by step. But now, I think that rank 5 is not something rare. Look at this tunnel, there are at least 30 huge rock men. Fong Zheng, it is good that you feel indebted to Immortal Crane Sect's generosity towards nurturing you. But do not put yourself down. Man is the spirit of all beings. Although variant humans call themselves humans, these rock men might look strong and brave, but in one-on-one battles, they are unable to compare to the rank 5 Gu Masters in our sect. What they specialize in are group battles." Lord Sky Crane laughed. Upped. TED Chapters. NN. Velbin.com. Is that so? Lord Sky Crane said, "These rock men are very stupid. It was because they encountered a rich master that they could have such accomplishments. Do you think these rock men can compare to the elders in our sect? If I was still alive, I could deal with more than 10 of them at once. Alright, we are at the blood pool. Fang Zheng heard the words, blood pool, and his muscles contracted involuntarily. He pushed the door in front of him, entering a cave. Chapter 669, He Feng Yang Scheme. This cave was as large as a plaza. Blood-colored light filled the cave along with a dense bloody odor. In the center of the cave, a round hole had been dug out, inside of which blood gurgled and emitted hot air. Fang Zheng took a deep breath before taking off his clothes in a familiar fashion. When naked he then entered the blood pool, immediately taking large gaping breaths due to the scalding blood. He soon adapted to the temperature of the blood and stood still at the center of the blood pool. The blood pool reached up to his waist, revealing his chest and most of his arms. Begin. Do it one by one, don't be anxious. First is Iron Blood Gu. Lord Sky Crane reminded. Fang Zheng slowly closed his eyes and activated Iron Blood Gu as instructed. Immediately, the Gu worm's power started transforming his blood. His red blood began to darken and become denser, the blood flow also became extremely slow. As a result, Fang Zheng's fair skin also darkened. Maintain Iron Blood Gu, activate Blood Blade Gu. Lord Sky Crane said again. Fang Zheng activated Blood Blade Gu, his body shuddered, his skin burst open forming over 100 wounds from which large numbers of blood blades shot out, they were all pitch-black iron blood blades. Shortly afterwards, blood like molten iron slowly flowed out of the wounds. Fang Zheng had a cold expression, he did not feel any pain, instead, intense pleasure attacked his mind. This was the effect of Iron Blood Gu, it could turn pain to pleasure and help the Gu master to adapt to battles, even a weak Gu master could turn into a warrior addicted to battle. This was one of the achievements of Immortal Crane's sect from years of researching blood path. This blood slowly flowed into the bright red blood pool, dyeing the nearby area around Fang Zheng black. It is the crucial step now, use Blood Merge Gu. Lord Sky Crane reminded. Fang Zheng gritted his teeth as he activated Blood Merge Gu. Immediately, under the effect of the Gu worm, the more than 100 wounds on his body burst out with an intense suction force. The surrounding blood was being absorbed without pause. Ah! Fang Zheng groaned softly, the intense pain had turned into intense pleasure. He gritted his teeth hard, his body trembling non-stop. As large amounts of blood were absorbed, his body inflated, turning into an abnormal fatty. His body was over 3 times the size of his original self. His skin burst open and the thick, snake-like veins twisted around in his body. The elegant and handsome young master had transformed into a nauseating, ugly monster. Don't forget your goal, you need to resist this pleasure. Fang Zheng, activate Failed Blood Demon Flower Gu. Lord Sky Crane was monitoring Fang Zheng's situation and hurriedly reminded him. The words, Failed Blood Demon Flower Gu, shook Fang Zheng's mind and he was barely able to get past the intense pleasure, gasping as he activated Failed Blood Demon Flower Gu. Fang Zheng tightly clenched his fists, a large amount of blood in his body was rapidly being corrupted. Under the effect of the Gu worm, vines started growing out of his blood. These thin vines pierced Fang Zheng's skin and soon coiled around his body. Flower buds started growing out of the vines and quickly blossomed, turning into pretty blue flowers resembling chrysanthemums. Erg! Fang Zheng tightly gritted his teeth, groaning softly in pain. His face was pale, his whole body was like soil with many demonic flowers growing forcibly on him. This intense pain was 10 times more terrifying than a woman giving birth. Even Iron Blood Gu's effect was not able to resist this kind of pain. Fang Zheng almost shattered his white teeth from the pain. His face turned pale white and blue veins popped up on his forehead, making him look malevolent and terrifying. Your blood is boiling, your organs and your body will be burned by your own blood if this goes on. Use cold blood goo quickly. Lord Sky Crane reminded nervously. Feng Zheng activated cold blood goo with great difficulty. His blood quickly cooled down till he was shivering from the cold. He was finally out of the deadly crisis. That will do. Demon flowers will greatly increase the effects of your blood path goo worms. You are just a step away from success. Use blood sense goo. Lord Sky Crane said with a hurried tone. Blood sense. Feng Zheng lowered his head, his gaze had turned blurry from the pain. From the many drills he had done before, he was finally able to persist and activate this blood path investigative goo worm. Several breaths later, Feng Zheng spoke. I can sense, underground, southeast, distance is 5 to 6,000 steps. Great, you did it again. You are on the verge of success. It is the final step. Use blood scar goo to mark the position. Arg. Feng Zheng started to shout unconsciously at this time. His gaze was completely blurry, the weakness caused his body to be on the verge of collapse. He exerted all his strength to extract all the potential he had to activate blood scar goo. He was delirious. There was still enough primeval essence in his rank 5 aperture, but he could only mobilize a small portion. The primeval essence was like a small creek flowing slowly into blood scar goo. However, blood scar goo had extremely large demand for primeval essence. Feng Zheng could only persist for 8 breaths of time before he finally collapsed, falling down into the blood pool, unconscious. An incense burner was letting out wisps of smoke. This quiet room had no windows and was extremely dim. Feng Yang was wearing a white robe with a black belt, sitting on a meditation mat with wide sleeves. He looked young and mild like jade. His dark green brows were sharp and long, reaching up to his waist. At this moment, his serene and deep eyes were staring at the spirit incubating flea in front of him. The spirit incubating flea was floating in the air, and Lord Sky Crane's soul was reporting the results of Feng Zheng's training. Feng Yang said with a dissatisfied tone, sure enough, despite letting him live in Fu Hu blessed for 8 years and also giving him many relic goo to become a rank 5 goo master in a short period of time, he still can't achieve a simple thing like simultaneously activating 6 to 7 goo worms. Lord Sky Crane considered his words before speaking. Feng Zheng is young, he is still lacking in the basics of multitasking. But this subordinate feels he is a very hard worker and he has made large progress rapidly. Recalling the first attempt, he only lasted a breath of time after activating blood merge goo before he fainted. Visit nov.c/m for the L. Test updates. Therefore I added iron blood goo. The result was that in the second try, the pleasure was too much for him, the blood flowed out wantonly till he fainted. He lasted for 3 breaths of time. Feng Yang interrupted Lord Sky Crane in displeasure. Lord Sky Crane quickly said, Lord Supreme Elder, truthfully speaking, even this subordinate would find it hard to multitask under such intense pain and pleasure. Feng Zheng is not far from success, he was able to persist for 8 breaths of time this time. One needs to last for 10 breaths of time to activate blood scar goo successfully. And he is only lacking the last 2 breaths of time. As long as we can train a few more times and allow a little more time, we can. Enough. How much more? You still want to train more? Time, just hear yourself, how much time has been wasted in your plan? How long? Years. There is still no improvement, Dang Hun Mountain is still not in our hands. Don't you know how many dissatisfied voices are there in the sect? How many disciples are requesting the higher-ups to open the exchange of guts goo? Subordinate is incompetent and even implicated Lord Supreme Elder, I have committed a heinous sin. Lord Sky Crane begged for mercy when he saw Feng Yang become furious. Feng Yang took some deep breaths before waving his sleeve, leave now, there is only a month before the sect convention. Before I go to the sect convention, I want to hear the good news of your training succeeding. and that we can start our plan to capture Hu immortal blessed land. But Lord, a month is too short, Fang Zheng will not be able to endure excessive training. We can nurse his physical health with Gu worms, but the intense pleasure and pain will injure the soul and can even cause his soul to shatter. Lord Sky Crane inquired. He Feng Yang chuckled, isn't the collapse of his soul exactly what you want to see? Thus, you can seize his body and resurrect. Wasn't this your initial plan? His smile turned gentler as he said this. This Fang Zheng has only gone on a crash course to reach rank 5 Gu Master, his nature is still childish. He is insufficiently tempered, how could he compare to you, Lord Sky Crane? After we use him to seize Hu immortal blessed land, you can return. Sigh, since Su San and Zhou Wu were killed by that demon Song Zi Xing, there are fewer and fewer capable subordinates like you at my side. The gentler He Feng Yang's tone became, the colder Lord Sky Crane felt in his heart, he replied in a grateful tone, receiving such importance from Lord Supreme Elder, this subordinate will definitely repay Lord's kindness greatly and offer my life in sacrifice. Good, take your leave now. He Feng Yang waved for Lord Sky Crane to leave. The quiet room now only had He Feng Yang, his smile gradually disappeared before being replaced by a grave expression, his gaze somewhat tense. After Fang Yuan seized Hu immortal blessed land, he had been in charge of this matter and now a year had passed, the sect's pressure on him was growing larger day by day. Especially his enemy in the sect, Gu immortal Lei Tan, who had publicly ridiculed his incompetence several times. The sect convention a month later was a tough barrier. If He Feng Yang could not show any progress, it would be very difficult to cross this barrier. He could almost hear Lei Tan's mockery echoing throughout the convention. But it won't be long as this plan succeeds, I can shut the mouths of all those petty people like Lei Tan. I would have the greatest contribution to the sect over these last years. In the attack against Hu immortal blessed land, I will personally make a move. Moreover, I have invited Fairy Tsangyu and Old Lord Kenyang. Fairy Tsangyu has similar battle strength to me, and has at least 3 mortal killer moves. While Old Lord Kenyang is a rank 7 Gu immortal with an offensive immortal Gu. The only problem is that the land spirit can prohibit the use of all mortal Gu. I don't have any immortal Gu to use, so I might not be able to do much. The only method is to consume green grape immortal essence. Fortunately, Hu immortal blessed land was originally barren and not managed properly, how much green grape immortal essence could it have accumulated? I don't believe Fang Yuan can exhaust our 3 Gu immortals' combined strength. As long as Hu immortal's immortal essence is consumed, the land spirit will be powerless and won't be able to restrict mortal Gu. At that time, He Feng Yang mumbled to himself, gradually calming his tensed mind. At the same time, in an underground cave in Hu immortal blessed land, Fang Yuan slowly stepped out of the wisdom light halo, a satisfied smile on his face. Just now, he had successfully deduced the killer move, Icy Stardust. Chapter 670, Icy Drill Stardust. The starlight firefly Gu were like a swarm of bees, flying in the air, giving off blue starlight. The starlight was being drawn in by an invisible force, gathering into a stargate. This was a huge circular door, it was made up of starlight, it shined like an illusion, it was like a scene within a dream. As time passed, the starlight firefly Gu continued to dwindle in numbers, as the dead starlight firefly Gu fell to the ground from midair. One leg stepped out of the stargate into Hu immortal blessed land, next, the entire person walked out of the stargate. It was an old man, he had white hair and deep wrinkles, his eyes were tired but bright, it was Tai Bai Yun Sheng who had returned from Langya blessed land. I am back again. Tai Bai Yun Sheng was covered in dust, he looked at the scenery in Hu immortal blessed land, sighing to himself. Although he had not lived here for a long time, he felt that this was his home. He had a sense of belonging to this place. At this time, Fang Yuan flew over from the sky, ha ha ha, Old Bai, you came back at a good time. Come, see the killer move that I just deduced. Tai Bai Yunxing saw this familiar figure and laughed heartily. Oh, is that so? I bought a cloud path defensive killer move from the Inkman King. Why don't we fellow disciples have a friendly match? Saying this, he flew into the air. Fang Yuan heard this and raised his eyebrows. He stretched out one of his right arms, with his palm facing the sky, and his fingers straight. A lump of starlight soon began to form in his palm. Oh. Is your killer move a star path killer move? Tai Bai Yunxing saw this starlight lump and was shocked. RE. Add updated ST. Rise at n/vel/bin.com. He flew into the sky, as a ring of white clouds appeared around him. Tai Bai Yunxing was at the center of these white clouds. The clouds were like a huge belt, moving around along with Tai Bai Yunxing. Fang Yuan slowly moved his fingers, grabbing the starlight lightly in his hands. Old Bai, get ready to take this. He growled as he flicked a finger. A speck of starlight shot out like lightning. The starlight speck size was small, but extremely fast. It flew in the air, shooting towards Tai Bai Yunxing. Decent speed. Tai Bai Yunxing evaluated. From such a long distance, with him completely focused, he had a chance to dodge it. But because they were exchanging blows, he wanted to test his own cloud path killer move, thus he stood still and took the starlight head on. When the starlight got close to Tai Bai Yunxing, the white cloud ring suddenly rotated, at an extremely fast pace. The cloud ring blocked the starlight for him. Tai Bai Yunxing stopped the cloud ring. He gazed with rapt attention, only to see that at the area where the cloud ring had blocked the starlight, it had turned blue, and frost energy was oozing, creating a layer of frost. In response, he said laughingly to Fang Yuan, "It seems this killer move that you deduced isn't too amazing. You have to know, my killer move has not been fully activated yet." The corners of Fang Yuan's mouth opened, showing his sharp, uneven teeth. "Neither has mine, take this." He flicked his fingers, as countless specks of starlight were shot out instantly. Tai Bai Yunxing was still at the same spot, but the cloud ring around him was rotating faster and faster. It was almost like a white ball had formed around him. Fang Yuan's specks of starlight were blocked by the cloud ring completely. Fang Yuan did not stop attacking, he showed an interested gaze. The pure white cloud ring was gradually turning blue from the starlight, and its speed was getting slower. Your killer move has a great freezing effect, it can slow your enemies. Tai Bai Yunxing evaluated, my killer move also has another effect. Saying this, he continuing activating his killer move. The cloud ring that had almost been frozen into a blue ice statue exploded. With a loud bang, the blue frost turned into vapor as it spread towards the surroundings. Tai Bai Yunxing showed joy, praising himself, my cloud ring can store the attacks of enemies. When it reaches its limits or when I activate the following effect of my killer move, I can make the cloud ring explode, to let my enemies face their own attacks. Junior brother, it seems my killer move is stronger than the one you deduced. Fang Yuan snickered, Old Bai, it is still too early to say that. Saying so, he flicked his wrist, and threw the entire starlight lump towards Tai Bai Yunxing. Tai Bai Yunxing's heart shuddered, he quickly activated his killer move, and 5 cloud rings formed around him. With him as the center, the cloud rings expanded out with varying sizes. The cloud rings were like 5 concentric circles surrounding him, protecting him in the center. The starlight lump came attacking, but the 5 cloud rings rotated rapidly, their afterimages produced an illusory white ball. Tai Bai Yunxing laughed loudly, he was in the middle and felt extremely safe. But right at this moment, the starlight lump exploded. Ding ding ding, dang dang dang. Large amounts of starlight specks flew everywhere, colliding into one another. The explosion covered Tai Bai Yunxing's entire body, as frost energy burst out. The force of this explosion far surpasses the force of the individual starlight specks added together. Tai Bai Yunxing's expression changed, the 5 cloud rings had turned blue, and their speed fell. Again. Fong Yuan raised his 8 arms, with his monstrous arms simultaneously grabbing at the air like claws. The next moment, lumps of starlight formed in his palms. Tai Bai Yunxing saw this and his pupils shrunk. He did not dare to be overconfident. He quickly activated his gu worms and rapidly rotated the rings. Fong Yuan stood on the spot, his 8 arms fired shots consecutively, the starlight lumps flew like a meteor, bombing in the direction of Tai Bai Yunxing. Bam bam bam. The explosions were right next to his ears. Tai Bai Yunxing's appearance turned pathetic, as he dodged around. The 5 cloud rings had reached their limits, they self-detonated one by one, while the force of the detonation allowed him to regain his momentum. Tai Bai Yunxing quickly replenished the 5 cloud rings, as Fong Yuan continued to unleash his explosions, but he managed to maintain his defense. Enough. Fong Yuan suddenly stopped. Tai Bai Yunxing breathed roughly, he slowly flew towards Fong Yuan. What is the name of this killer move? What % of its full power did you use? Fong Yuan replied without any shame, I named this icy drill Stardust, this is my unique creation. When I activate it fully, I can unleash a water vat-sized starlight lump up to 6 times, but the bigger the lump, the slower the speed of movement. Because the more stardust there is inside, the more they collide, and the energy used up would reduce their speed. That is to say, you did not even use 50% of the killer move's power. How is your killer move so strong? Although it cannot compare to an immortal killer move, the power is already far superior to most mortal killer moves. Tai Bai Yunxing gasped. Fong Yuan laughed heartily, when I was in Imperial Court Blessed Land, I found an inheritance, it came from a famous poet of Northern Plains, Do Min Jun. He was creative and created a brand new star gu. This star gu can increase the attack power of star path gu worms, it is like the weakened version of amplify effect gu. When I deduced this killer move, I fused this gu into it, thus the power was this great. This was the true reason why Fong Yuan chose a star path attack method. Tai Bai Yunxing realized at once, so that is it. I knew it, my defensive killer move is called 9 Cloud Ring, when activated at full force, 9 cloud rings can exist at once. Not only is the defense incredible, it can be replenished at any time, and can even return the attacks of enemies back to them. This cost me 2 whole immortal essence stones. Fong Yuan nodded, your killer move is definitely worth the price, in fact, this will be priced at 2.5 immortal essence stones in Treasure Yellow Heaven. Inkman King is giving you a favor. Tai Bai Yunxing laughed, I understand this clearly, he was considering my landscape as before immortal gu. He is also a gu immortal, he needs to undergo tribulations and calamities, when his blessed land suffers damage, he would need to ask me to repair it. Landscape as before gu is my way to earn a fortune from now on. Old Bai, when your business expands in the future, I am sure many gu immortals will come to you for help. Come, let's talk while flying. Fong Yuan and Tai Bai Yunxing slowly flew towards Dang Hun Mountain. Tai Bai Yunxing looked back, only to see that on the battlefield earlier, there were still dozens of blue star clouds. The insides of these clouds were still emitting a cracking noise, it came from the collision of starlight specks. As the frost energy spread around the star clouds, their color faded with time. Junior brother, you are incredible. This icy drill stardust is worth at least 4 immortal essence stones if you sell it in Treasure Yellow Heaven. Tai Bai Yunxing sighed. If not for wisdom gu, how would I have endless inspiration? Fong Yuan replied plainly. Actually, with just wisdom gu, if he did not have little immortal Xing Luo's ice path killer move, Icy Yarn, and her smaller killer move, 6-9 Stardust, he would not be able to deduce the killer move Icy Drill Stardust. When little immortal Xing Luo started rising up, she was extremely poor. Using the opportunity of the Five Regions War, she used her self-created icy stardust killer move to accumulate her wealth, finally gaining prominence and becoming a relatively famous character. Fang Yuan's intention was to make an attempt of buying the former version of icy stardust from her. When he saw icy yarn and 6-9 stardust, he guessed that these two killer moves were the foundation of little immortal Xing Luo's new self-created killer move. After he spent half an immortal essence stone to buy it, he rushed towards Wisdom Gu and used the light of wisdom to make deductions. Wisdom Gu's halo brought him unlimited inspiration, and Fang Yuan was a person who had been reborn. He had seen the power of icy stardust with his own eyes. This gave him the proper direction, avoiding the need to deduce blindly. Eventually, he combined Do Min Jun's inheritance within, deducing the killer move Icy Drill Stardust. This killer move was different from Icy Stardust. It had a smaller range but much greater power. One could say that using the inheritance of Do Min Jun, he had already slightly surpassed Icy Stardust. Rank 9 Wisdom Gu is truly phenomenal. I simply cannot imagine the effect when it is used fully. Honestly, I am a little envious of you. After becoming a zombie, you could receive such benefits. Tai Bai Yunsheng looked at Fang Yuan with admiration. Fang Yuan shook his head. There are a lot of flaws by becoming a zombie. Firstly, I have to thank Red Lotus Demon Venerable. Next, I could reach this step because of coincidences and lucky opportunities. If not for the peculiar situation back then, allowing me to reach an arrangement with Wisdom Gu, how could I utilize the light of wisdom? That's right, if not for Red Lotus Demon Venerable breaking fate Gu, after we die, our souls would be sucked into the door of life and death, slumbering in the death domain for all eternity. How would anyone be able to remain in the world, to become a zombie? Tai Bai Yunxing sighed deeply. Alright, before I left, I urged you to indirectly ask about the details of Luck Path from Langya Land Spirit. Now that you've returned, what information did you obtain? Fang Yuan asked. Ever since he learned that Longhair Ancestor had discussed about Tao with Giant Sun Immortal Venerable for 7 days and 7 nights, this idea emerged in him. Langya Land Spirit was far easier to deal with than Mo Yao's will. But Tai Bai Yunxing shook his head. He showed a strange smile. After I repaired a few rivers, I was chased out by Langya Land Spirit in a hurry. He has to eat his medicine grinder chips. He is very busy. Eat his medicine grinder chips?